You have to stay home while we go on our family trip because it's more fun without anyone else there. My mother-in-law said happily on the phone. I might bring you back a souvenir if I remember. I was supposed to go on this trip with my in-laws and my husband, but now they were leaving me behind. Ever since I married her son, my mother-in-law, who really loves him, never misses a chance to say something mean or bother me. Staying home might be a problem, I said back, but my mother-in-law just laughed like she was making fun of me. Is it a problem for you? Just think of it as punishment for not doing what I say. Then she hung up. It's not a problem for me, it's a problem for you guys, right? My name is Jessica, and I'm 30 years old. I do housework and work part-time at the local supermarket. It's been 3 years since I married my husband, Mike, who used to work with me. Even though we worked in different parts of the company, we talked a lot before we started dating. What really brought Mike and me closer together was a party at the end of the year at our office. It was a big gathering with people from different departments. Luckily, I ended up sitting next to Mike. Since we were already friends, we talked easily. At one point, Mike had to leave for the restroom and I was left alone. That's when a boss from another department, who had been drinking a lot, started bothering me, trying to get me to drink more. I didn't know what to do because he was a boss I didn't know well. Just when I was feeling uncomfortable, Mike came back. He saw what was happening and calmly took the boss away to another table. When Mike came back to our table, he asked if I was okay and joked about how the boss couldn't handle his alcohol. That's when I started seeing Mike in a new way, and I confessed that I had feelings for him. That's how our relationship started. Things went smoothly from there, and we got married 3 years ago. Even though we don't have kids yet, our marriage is strong and happy. Even though Mike and I are happily married, there's one big problem. My mother-in-law, who we're currently living with, when we first got married, we had our own apartment, but there was a fire in the building next to ours, and our place got flooded with water from the firefighting efforts. We had to leave because our apartment wasn't safe to live in anymore. We didn't know where to go, but Mike's mom offered for us to stay with them. We were thankful for the help and moved in with them. But things got difficult after we moved in. My mother-in-law, who already made mean comments sometimes because she loves Mike a lot, started nagging me more often. One weekend, for example, I had finished all the chores and was relaxing with a cup of coffee in the living room. When my mother-in-law came home, she started bustling around the house. Then she came up to me and said, "Jessica, you're not cleaning properly. You need to spend more time on it, and be thankful for your hard-working husband. As his wife, it's your job to support him. I can't believe you can't even do that much. If you're not happy, then you should leave right now." Honestly, I felt frustrated thinking, here we go again. My mother-in-law constantly criticized me, and it seemed like it happened almost every day. I figured the only reason she agreed to let us stay with them was because she wanted to be close to her son, Mike, again. My presence as his wife probably just annoyed her. "Mom, please don't be so hard on Jessica," Mike stepped in. "But there's some truth to what you're saying. Even though she works part-time, she shouldn't slack off on chores." Mike often took his mom's side, which sometimes made me wish he'd support me more as his wife. I never meant to neglect the housework. Even though I work 4 days a week, I always make sure to take care of our home and family of 4, even when I'm not feeling well. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who's a homemaker, spends most of her time going out and having fun. Since we live in her house, I couldn't complain openly. I just try to be patient in this uncomfortable situation. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Mike suggested that we go on a trip, just the two of us. "Why don't we go to a spa resort next month? The busy season at work is over and I need to use up some of my annual leave. I thought it would be nice for us to relax somewhere." A spa sounds amazing. I haven't scheduled any work shifts for next month yet, so I can take time off, I told Mike. After talking it over, we decided to go on a 2-day spa trip in the middle of next month. Since we planned to go during the week, we expected to have a peaceful and unhurried time together. I was thrilled about the trip and couldn't contain my excitement. Whenever I had a moment, I found myself researching our destination. Just as I was getting ready to book our stay, my mother-in-law said something surprising. "Jessica, I heard you and Mike are going on a trip. Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Well, I stuttered, worried about how she might react. Then she said exactly what I feared she would. "Next month is my husband's and my anniversary. I was thinking of celebrating with a family trip. A fancy hotel would be nice." I really didn't want to go on a trip with my mother-in-law. Mike and I were planning on going by ourselves this time. How about we all go together next time? I suggested, hoping to compromise. But my mother-in-law wasn't having it. It won't be the same if it's not this time. It's our anniversary celebration. Just as I was about to respond, Mike walked in from work. Welcome home, Mike. We were just talking about the trip, my mother-in-law said enthusiastically. Oh, I'm excited, Mike said, seeming to agree with his mom. I wondered how she found out about the trip, but it seemed like Mike might have told her. Mike noticed my look and seemed a bit uneasy. Mom's really excited, so let's postpone our trip for another time. It'll be more fun if we all go together, Mike suggested. With Mike and his dad agreeing, I couldn't refuse going on the trip with all of us. Okay, next time it'll just be us, I promise, Mike said, looking relieved when I reluctantly agreed. Even though I wasn't happy about how the trip turned out, there wasn't much I could do about it now. At least I decided I'd be the one to pick the places we visit and the food we try. So I took charge of booking hotels and planning our sightseeing. Then came the day of the trip. I had packed everything the day before, so the plan was to wake up an hour before leaving, enjoy breakfast, and then head out. When my alarm went off, I stretched and called out for Mike, noticing he wasn't beside me. Then it hit me, he wasn't anywhere in the house. Could it be? I dialed Mike's cell phone, but there was no answer. When I called my mother-in-law's phone, she picked up right away. Oh, Jessica dear, what's up? Mike can't talk right now because he's driving. Where are you guys? I asked, feeling a sinking sensation. My mother-in-law responded casually, isn't it obvious? We're on a family vacation. It wouldn't be a proper family trip with an outsider like you, so you'll have to stay home. Maybe we'll bring you back a souvenir if we remember. I could hear the triumph in her voice. Stay at home? That's going to be a problem, I told my mother-in-law, but she just laughed mockingly. Oh, is it a problem for you? Just see it as punishment for not doing what I say. Then she hung up abruptly. I covered my face with my hands and shook my shoulders, but instead of crying, I burst out laughing. Well, they better enjoy their trip. They'll regret leaving me behind. I quickly went online and booked a nice hotel in the tourist spot we were supposed to visit today. Then I made a reservation at a restaurant where I could enjoy a delicious dinner, just for myself. After quickly getting ready and having breakfast, I felt ready to have some fun. All right, time for a good time, I said to myself as I grabbed my luggage and hopped on the train. I had done a lot of research on different tourist spots, and I was determined to have a vacation. It's a small tourist spot, so I might bump into Mike and my in-laws, but I don't care. They're the ones who messed up. I thought as the train approached our destination. From now on, I'm going to forget about my mother-in-law and Mike and just enjoy myself, I decided as I stepped off the train. I visited a cute boutique, had tea at a trendy cafe, and chatted with locals, thoroughly enjoying my solo adventure. As the day turned into night, it was time to check into the hotel I had booked, one of the top luxury hotels in the area. I felt like I needed to do something drastic like this to rejuvenate myself. As I walked towards the hotel's check-in counter, I heard a woman's voice causing a scene. Why can't we stay here? We're willing to pay. When I looked closer, I realized it was my mother-in-law causing the disturbance. Of course, they wouldn't be allowed to stay there because this wasn't the hotel I had booked for the four of us. From a safe distance, I saw Mike spotting me and calling out, Hey Jessica, what's going on? We couldn't stay at the hotel you booked, so we have to find another one, but they're full. He came towards me, looking a bit angry, followed by my mother-in-law who seemed furious. Well, that's what happens when the person who booked the hotel isn't here to check in. It's a security rule. I did warn you, I said calmly. At that moment, they seemed to realize their mistake and exchanged surprised glances. Just as they were about to cause more trouble, hotel staff rushed over. It was quite funny to watch my mother-in-law being escorted out of the hotel, gently but firmly, by the staff. Remember this, we will stay in a place far more luxurious than this hotel, my mother-in-law exclaimed before she and Mike left. Feeling somewhat relieved, I proceeded with my check-in, leaving them without accommodation. Once I completed the check-in process, I was shown to my room. The clean and luxurious decor made me feel like I was in a dream. After settling my luggage, I decided to explore the hotel. After wandering around for a bit, I returned to the lobby. More guests were arriving. I sat on the sofa and zoned out for a while when two young women sat down next to me. They seemed excited, chatting about their impressions of the hotel. Their conversation quickly turned interesting. "Hey, did you hear about that hotel near the station? There's a really creepy rumor about it. They say if you stay in a second-floor room, you start hearing things that aren't there, and your stuff gets stolen. And even worse, there was a case where someone died, and nobody knows who did it. We're so lucky we're staying here, right? Do you think it's true? But why hasn't anyone been arrested? I mean, wouldn't you call the police if something like that happened? Well, there are rumors that even the hotel staff might be involved. It's so scary. What a dangerous place." When I checked the time, I realized it was almost time for my dinner reservation. I quickly got up and hurried to the restaurant. The meal was so satisfying. After dinner, I returned to the hotel, took a relaxing bath, changed into my pajamas, and settled in to watch TV. That's when my phone rang. "Hello. We found a hotel to stay in, and it's really nice. It's a shame you're not here with us. But don't worry, we'll enjoy it twice as much for you," my mother-in-law said cheerfully. "Oh, is that so? Well, you're lucky to find a place at the last minute," I replied casually. "Isn't it? It's quiet and relaxing here because there aren't many other guests around. Plus, it's so close to the tourist spot, and the hotel is gorgeous." "I wonder why that is," my mother-in-law went on. That's when it hit me. Could it be the hotel near the station? "Yes, that's the one." "Why do you ask?" she responded. I remembered the unsettling story I had heard about the hotel's bad reputation in the lobby before dinner. "I think you should leave," I warned my mother-in-law. But she just laughed off my concern. "Are you jealous that we found a nice place to stay? Well then, too bad for you. Bye." Once again, my mother-in-law ended the call without giving me a chance to respond. I didn't bother calling her back. I had given my advice, and that was enough. I switched off my phone. I didn't want my relaxation to be interrupted any further. I spent the rest of the evening leisurely and drifted off into a peaceful sleep. The next day, after checking out of the hotel, I visited the tourist spots I had missed the day before. I returned home as the sun was setting, feeling content. As I approached the house, I noticed light leaking out from the windows, indicating that the three of them had already returned home. "I'm back." I announced my arrival in my usual tone as I opened the door. As I entered the living room, all three of them started talking at once, creating a commotion. I was taken aback but managed to calm them down. Then my mother-in-law began recounting the incident from the previous night. After they had all gone to bed, they heard sounds of wrestling and someone entering the room. Paralyzed with fear, my mother-in-law stayed in bed quietly while the intruder seemed to roam around the room for about 10 minutes before leaving without a sound. Feeling relieved, my mother-in-law eventually fell back asleep, only to wake up the next morning to find that all their belongings, including wallets and smartphones that were left on the desk, were gone. The only things left were the coin pouch and key holder that Mike had kept in his jacket's inside pocket. In a panic, they rushed to inform the hotel staff, only to be told, "You still need to pay for the room." Shockingly, the hotel staff didn't even call the police. Feeling helpless, the troubled trio used a coin's mic to make a call from a public phone to a nearby relative, pleading for help. Luckily, the relatives arrived swiftly, covering the hotel charges and arranging for their safe return home. They promised to report the incident to the police soon. However, their frustration turned towards me. "If only you had warned us more seriously to leave, we wouldn't have ended up in this mess," my mother-in-law scolded. "That's right, Jessica, you bear some responsibility for this incident. What are you going to do about it?" Mike added, joining in with his mother's scolding. But if my in-laws hadn't left me behind to go on their trip, none of this would have happened in the first place. "I did warn you, didn't I?" I responded honestly. Mike's face went pale. "Shut up. You're just the wife. Don't get cheeky. We're getting a divorce. I can't put up with you anymore." I was stunned into silence. I quietly went to our bedroom, retrieved something from the cabinet, and returned to the living room to show it to Mike. "Divorce? Fine by me. I don't need a husband who won't stand up for his mistreated wife," I declared firmly. Mike's face went pale. What I had brought out were the divorce papers I had asked a lawyer to prepare. I had been getting ready for this possibility. "Maybe we should take some time to think about it," Mike stammered, but my mother-in-law saw an opportunity to push Mike towards the divorce. You should just get rid of such a terrible wife now. Your mom will find you someone better, he urged. Unable to go against his mother's wishes, Mike eventually agreed to the divorce. Well then, goodbye. Please enjoy your life with your beloved family, he said, breaking down. Ignoring Mike's emotional state, I left the house. Later, through my lawyer, I submitted the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized. Despite Mike's attempts to reconcile, I ignored them all. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, who had succeeded in getting rid of me, seemed happy for a while, but her joy didn't last long. The news of the divorce and the end of their living together spread throughout the neighborhood, and people who enjoyed gossiping quickly connected it to my mother-in-law's mistreatment of me, revealing her unpleasant nature. She began to face judgmental stares from those around her, and it seemed that finding a new wife for Mike was no longer a priority. I returned to my hometown and was able to find a new job thanks to a friend's recommendation. After everything I've been through, I have my fill of marriage for now. I plan to enjoy being single for a while.
My dinner still isn't ready. If you're not going to take care of the housework, we're getting a divorce. I wonder who he thinks makes it possible for him to have meals. Fine, if that's how you feel, maybe we should get a divorce. What? I've had enough of this marriage and want to leave this house. Can you help me? Why should I? We're no longer connected, right? I'm Karen, a 34-year-old office worker. It's been a year since I married Shane. While many enjoy the bliss of newlywed life, my experience has been far from that. Honestly, our relationship has been strained. The root of the issue lies in his behavior. I overlooked it before marriage, but now I see that he's a classic domineering husband, overly controlling. Hey, where's the food? When will it be ready? I just got home. If you came home earlier, you could have made something yourself. What are you talking about? Don't you see I've been working hard and just got home? I was at work too. Your job can't be that important. I probably make more than you do. Bragging about your earnings. You're really narrow-minded. I hold a significant position at my company. I'll be earning more than you soon enough. Well, I hope that's true. Are you dubbing me? How dare you question me like that? My husband reacts defensively to every word I say, trying to exert control. I'm going to set a curfew for you. A curfew? I was taken aback by his sudden declaration. We're not children. I'm serious. Be home by 7:00 p.m. Don't say such ridiculous things. I might be working late because of overtime. No matter how much I protested, my husband remained unyielding. Be quiet. I'm serious. You need to follow this rule. A promise should be made with mutual agreement. What my husband was imposing was nothing but coercion, a blatant threat. A few days later, after coming home past 8:00 p.m. due to work, I was met with an unbelievable situation. What? What do you mean? As I tried to unlock the front door, I realized the chain was on. Panicking, I pressed the intercom. Yes? I heard my husband's voice through the intercom. What's going on here? What do you mean? We agreed on a curfew of 7:00 p.m., didn't we? Huh? You were serious about that? Of course I was serious. I told him that while he speaks with such confidence, his behavior is just childish. I really want him to stop. Stop the nonsense and just open the door. No way. You always get so full of yourself. Full of myself? What are you talking about? I'm saying you act so arrogant when you think you have the upper hand. In the end, my husband really refused to let me into the house. I was deeply unsettled by his drastic change, wondering how he could have become so different from the man I once knew. We had first met at a social mixer. At that time, he was a successful businessman working for a top company, and he was very intent on winning me over. With his career and finances stable, I was drawn to his advances. He was always polite and respectful, and that didn't change when we started dating. I believe he was a kind and wonderful man, and I was truly happy when he proposed. Karen, I vow to make you happy with these hands of mine. Trust me, and let's build a future together. Yes, thank you. I look forward to supporting each other. I had believed that marrying him would surely lead to happiness, but once we were married, it was far from what I had imagined. My husband turned out to be selfish, arrogant, and prone to verbal abuse. To make matters worse, about 6 months after our marriage, he abruptly quit his job. You quit your job? Why? That company wasn't worth it. They didn't appreciate my talents. Why should a junior be promoted over me? It's absurd. He left his job on a whim, frustrated by his lack of promotion. It was a shocking turn of events. I had respected him as a confident professional working at a prestigious company, and I had tolerated his verbal abuse as a result. But now, my once elite husband was suddenly unemployed. He went to numerous job interviews afterward, but none resulted in an offer. Damn it, why is this happening to me? I come from a top company. Even though I'm lowering myself by applying here, why can't I get the job? Maybe it's your attitude that's coming through in the interviews. Ha! Don't act like you know anything. Your workplace is a lower-ranking company anyway. That's harsh. So, you think so? I'm just speaking the truth. My husband took out his frustration on me. He had always been controlling at home, but his verbal abuse escalated significantly. Eventually, unable to find a new job, he settled for a part-time position working only 3 days a week, claiming it was due to job hunting. His income dropped to around $700 a month, yet he continued to act arrogantly toward me. My view of him deteriorated daily, and I regretted marrying him more and more. I found myself constantly overwhelmed with household chores and meal preparations while enduring his endless complaints. It felt like dealing with a teenager, and I was left physically and emotionally drained despite everything. I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce even though we had been married for less than a year. During this time, my husband grew increasingly bold, eventually setting a curfew for me and locking me out of the house. I wondered why I had to endure such treatment. After coming home exhausted from work and even doing the grocery shopping, he locked me out for missing the curfew. I was completely bewildered. Normally, I would consider returning to my parents' home, but since they had passed away, I didn't know where to turn. Desperate for help, I decided to call my best friend, Mika. Hello, Mika, can I come over now? What's going on? Did something happen? My husband won't let me into the house. What? Why not? Okay, come over right away. Thank you so much. With that, I hurried to Mika's place. Sorry for the sudden visit. Don't worry about it. What happened? I explained how my husband had locked me out of the house because I missed the curfew he had set. He actually did that. Yes, I can't believe it. It feels like he's being really abusive. Maybe his pride from working at a big corporation is making him look down on you. Oh, and I also mentioned my husband's sudden resignation. What? A part-time job? That's unbelievable. How can he act like this when you're the one supporting us? Yes, I'm thinking it might be best to leave him sooner rather than later. But we've only been married for less than a year. It doesn't feel right to just get divorced so easily. Karen, are you truly happy? No. My best friend looked concerned, pondering for a moment before offering a suggestion. I'm not sure if your marriage can be salvaged, but maybe you should start documenting his abusive behavior. You could keep a record or even make recordings. Really? I believe you should divorce him as soon as possible. And if you do decide to go through with it, I hope you can ensure he faces serious consequences. Yeah, you might be right. Exactly. It's important to document everything, and I'm here to support you through this. If you need a safe place, you can always come here. Thank you, Mika. My best friend was a tremendous source of comfort and support, and I was truly grateful. Having her as an ally gave me the courage I needed. To show my appreciation, I used the ingredients I had bought from the supermarket to prepare a homemade meal for her. This is delicious, Karen. You're really skilled at cooking. Really? It's been a while since someone praised my cooking, so I'm thrilled to hear that. Reuniting with my best friend after such a long time lifted my spirits. After leaving Mika's house, I sent an apology to my husband. Once he forgave me, I returned home. Have you really thought about what you did wrong? Yes, I realize I was wrong. I'm sorry. As I apologized with my head bowed, my husband's expression softened with satisfaction. As long as you understand, that's fine. Just be more careful next time. From then on, I did my best to meet my husband's demands. Despite my efforts, he often resorted to insults when he was in a bad mood. His words were belittling and dismissive, and each time they cut deep. I began recording these incidents, gathering evidence for when I reached my breaking point. My husband remained unemployed, only working part-time. It seemed he wasn't even trying to find a new job, as if he had given up. I was managing to support both of us with my income and handled all the household chores. He continued to complain and act badly towards me, trying to assert control. He seemed content with the situation, dependent on my salary, yet treating me with emotional abuse. I confided in my best friend that I didn't want a divorce, but my patience was wearing thin with his increasingly unacceptable behavior. I felt like I was at the end of my rope. How could he be so insensitive? How does he view me? Why did he even marry me? These questions plagued my mind. One day, after being forced to stay late at work, I arrived home past 7 o'clock p.m. Thankfully, my husband was out and hadn't returned yet, so I managed to get inside and began hastily preparing dinner. But he came home soon after. "Oh, well, welcome back." Noticing that dinner wasn't ready, he looked displeased. "Why isn't dinner ready yet?" "I'm sorry, it will be ready soon." "Don't lie, it looks like you've just started." "I apologize. I just got home." As we talked, I noticed he was carrying a bag from an expensive brand. While I was working hard, he had been leisurely spending on luxury goods. His selfishness was infuriating and inexcusable. Despite this, he continued to berate me, completely disregarding my feelings. "Are you incapable of learning, or are you deliberately trying to provoke me? You incompetent fool. If you neglect the household, we'll get a divorce. Do you understand?" In that moment, my patience snapped. Did he really think he was entitled to a meal provided by someone he treated so poorly? "Fine, if that's how you feel, shall we get a divorce then?" "What?" My husband looked stunned. "I've decided to leave this house." "Are you really serious about divorcing me?" "Yes, I can't continue with you. You're superficial, useless, arrogant, and the worst partner I've ever had." My words seemed to ignite fury in my husband. His face reddened, and his whole body trembled with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? As a low-ranking employee, you have no right to criticize me. I have no use for a woman like you." With that, he pulled out a prepared affidavit from a drawer. I hadn't realized he had it ready, but it worked to my advantage. I quickly signed the document, gathered my things, and left. Now, I had severed all ties with him. Feeling liberated, I headed to Mika's house, where she greeted me warmly. "You've worked hard. Now you're free." "Yes, I wouldn't have had the courage to divorce without your support. I'm really grateful." "Don't let your guard down. It's not over yet. He needs to face the consequences." "Absolutely and thoroughly." I hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against my ex-husband for moral harassment. He seemed quite flustered, clearly not expecting a legal battle. "Why me? And don't mess around." He erupted in anger. I was relieved to leave the details to my lawyer, avoiding direct confrontation with his outbursts. My lawyer methodically presented the facts and evidence, and eventually, my ex-husband seemed to resign himself to the situation. He had been blaming me for the divorce to his parents, but the lawsuit compelled them to seek the truth. Upon learning the full story, they were horrified and decided to disarm him. Now that he had lost his support system, my ex-husband was left to figure out how to manage on his own. He continued living in the expensive apartment he had always coveted during his employment. Even after quitting his job, I had been transferring money to cover his rent. But now that we were divorced, he had to handle his living expenses, rent, and compensate me for his abusive behavior. With rent set at $1,000 a month and his income not sufficient, he was in dire straits and reached out to me for help. "Hello, what's the problem?" "Help me, I'm at a loss here." "Why should I help you? We have no obligations to each other anymore." "But we once loved each other, didn't we?" "That's unsettling." "What do you mean? Do you think you're entitled to forgiveness just like that? Do you realize how deeply you've hurt me?" "I'm sorry, I'll apologize properly." "An apology like that means nothing to me. Every time I apologize, you get all self-righteous. It's clear you have no respect for me. Just so you know, my salary has increased. I'm now earning more than you ever did as a full-time employee." "What?" "You used to belittle me for being in a lower position, but it turns out you were the one in a weaker position. Your contentment with a part-time job and failure to find a new full-time role only highlights your own shortcomings." "No way." My ex-husband was shattered to discover that he was now inferior to me, someone he had once looked down upon. "There's nothing more to discuss. If you contact me again, I'll report you to the police." "Hey, wait." I declared this firmly, ignoring his pleas and ending the call. I had already blocked his number and intended to sever all ties with him. Later, I learned from my former in-laws that he had settled his unpaid rent with a loan and moved out of his apartment. He is now working full-time and living in a more affordable place. Despite this, he continues to make alimony payments to me on time, indicating that he's working hard with a renewed sense of purpose. However, that doesn't mean I have any desire to reconcile. I am now living in a spacious new flat with my best friend Mika. We fill our days with fun, conversations, evening drinks, and a peaceful, fulfilling life. I am deeply grateful to Mika for her support and plan to give her a special gift as a token of my appreciation. The notification from my bank popped up on my phone as I was arranging flowers on my grandmother's grave. $2 million transferred. My hands trembled as I read the message, anger and disbelief washing over me in waves. Michael had actually done it. He'd taken my inheritance without even asking. My name is Emma Chin, and at 34, I never thought I'd be standing at my grandmother's grave realizing my husband of 8 years had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The flowers I held, white lilies, Grand's favorite, suddenly felt heavy in my hands. I had just lost the woman who raised me, who taught me everything I knew about business and self-respect, and now my husband had stolen the last gift she'd given me. The inheritance wasn't just money. It represented years of my grandmother's hard work building her real estate empire from nothing after immigrating to America with just $100 in her pocket. My phone buzzed again. A text from Michael. Don't freak out when you see the transfer. I'm using it to fund RevTech Series A. This is our big break, babe. Your inheritance is finally going to mean something. I stared at his message, my vision blurring with tears of rage. Our big break? My inheritance finally meaning something. The money had meant everything. It was my grandmother's legacy, her way of ensuring I would always be independent, just like she had been. But Michael had never understood that. To him, money sitting in an account was money wasted. He'd been pushing his tech startup for years, burning through our savings while chasing his dreams of Silicon Valley glory. I'd supported him, believed in him, even when things got tight. But this, taking my inheritance without even asking, this was different. I placed the lilies carefully on Gran's grave, my hand lingering on the cool marble of her headstone. I'm sorry, Gran, I whispered. I know this isn't what you wanted for me. I could almost hear her voice, strong and clear despite her battle with cancer. Emma, my sweet girl, never let anyone take advantage of your kindness. You're stronger than you know. She had told me that just weeks before she passed, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength as she made me promise to be careful with the inheritance. The money isn't just for you, she had said. It's everything I built, everything I learned. Use it wisely. Don't let anyone take it from you. But I had failed her. I had trusted Michael, believed in our partnership, and now he had taken everything without a second thought. When I got home that evening, Michael was in his home office, surrounded by monitors displaying charts and spreadsheets. He barely looked up when I walked in, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Hey babe, he said, his tone distracted. Great news, I've already got meetings set up with 3 major investors. Once they see we got solid backing, they'll be fighting to get in on this round. We're going to be huge. I stood in the doorway, watching him. The man I had married, the kind, considerate partner who had supported me through grad school, seemed like a stranger now. In his place was someone consumed by ambition. Someone who could justify taking my inheritance because he thought he knew better than me. How could you do this? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. That money was for my grandmother. It was meant for me. He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation. Come on, Emma. You're not seriously upset about this, are you? I'm investing it, not spending it. This is going to make us rich. Us, I repeated. There is no us in this, Michael. You took my inheritance without asking. You had no right. He pushed back from his desk, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. I had every right. We're married. What's yours is mine, remember? Besides, what were you going to do with it? Let it sit in a bank account gathering dust. That was my choice to make, I said, my voice rising. Not yours. Gran left that money to me for a reason. Michael stood up, his face flushing with anger. Your grandmother was old school, Emma. She didn't understand modern business. This is how things work now. You have to move fast, take risks. I'm doing you a favor. I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. The arrogance, the entitlement, the complete disregard for my feelings or my grandmother's wishes. It had all been there, I realized. I just hadn't wanted to see it. But what Michael didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to find out before he made his grand move, was that I wasn't as helpless as he thought. Gran hadn't just left me money. She had taught me everything she knew about business, about protecting myself, about standing up for what was mine. I turned and walked out of his office without another word, leaving him to his spreadsheets and his dreams of tech glory. I had work to do. The next morning, I called Sarah Chen, my grandmother's longtime lawyer and friend. I hadn't wanted to make this call, had hoped I'd never need to, but Gran had insisted on introducing us months before she'd passed. Keep Sarah's number, she had said. Just in case. She knows what to do. Sarah picked up on the second ring. Emma, she said, her voice warm but professional. I was wondering when I hear from you. He took the money, I said simply. All of it. There was a pause, then Sarah sighed. I was afraid this might happen. Your grandmother was too. That's why we put certain measures in place. I felt the flicker of hope. What kind of measures? The inheritance wasn't just money in an account, Emma. Your grandmother set up a trust with very specific conditions. Any withdrawal over $10,000 requires dual authorization, yours and the trustees. And guess who the trustee is? I couldn't help but smile. You? Exactly. So unless you authorize that transfer. I didn't, I said quickly. Then what your husband did wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal. The bank should never have processed that transfer without proper authorization. We can have it reversed immediately. I sank into my chair, relief washing over me. Really? Just like that? Just like that, Sarah confirmed. But Emma, there's more. Your grandmother knew something like this might happen. She left instructions. If anyone tried to access the trust illegally, they would trigger certain clauses. Would you like to know what those are? I thought about Michael sitting in his office, so sure of himself, so convinced he knew better than everyone else. Yes, I said firmly. Tell me everything. That evening, as I reviewed the documents Sarah had sent over, Michael burst into my home office, his face red with anger. The transfer was reversed, he shouted, waving his phone at me. What did you do? I looked up calmly, channeling my grandmother's quiet strength. I didn't do anything, Michael. The trust did exactly what it was designed to do, protect my inheritance from unauthorized access. He froze, confusion replacing his anger. What trust? What are you talking about? The trust my grandmother set up, I explained, my voice steady. Did you really think she'd just leave $2 million in a regular bank account? Gran was smarter than that. She built an empire from nothing. She knew how to protect what was hers. Michael's face paled as the implications sank in. But we're married. I had every right to. No, I cut him off. You didn't. And by attempting to access the trust without authorization, you've triggered some interesting clauses that Gran put in place. Clauses? His voice cracked slightly. What clauses? I stood up, gathering the papers Sarah had sent. Well, for starters, your attempted theft has been reported to the bank's fraud department. They're launching an investigation into RevTech's finances. Standard procedure when someone tries to misappropriate trust funds. Michael stumbled back, collapsing into a chair. You can't be serious. Emma, this will ruin everything. The investors, the series of funding. That's not all, I continued, ignoring his protests. Gran was very specific about what should happen if someone tried to steal from the trust. The clause triggers an immediate audit of all shared accounts and assets. Everything will be scrutinized, Michael. Everything. His face went from pale to ashen. I knew why. The creative accounting he'd been doing with our joint accounts, the money he'd borrowed from my personal savings for his startup, it would all come to light. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice trembled. You wouldn't do this to me. To us. I'm not doing anything, I replied. These are just the consequences of your actions. You chose to take what wasn't yours. Now you get to deal with what happens next. He stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. We can fix this, he said desperately. I'll call the bank, explain it was a misunderstanding. We can stop the investigation before it starts. I shook my head. It's too late for that. The process has already begun. This is insane, he exploded. I'm your husband. I was trying to help us build a future together. Your grandmother would have understood that. The mention of Gran made my blood boil, but I kept my voice calm. No, Michael. Gran understood exactly what kind of person you are. That's why she protected me from you. He stared at me, his expression hardening. Protected you? From me? I've given you everything. A beautiful home, a comfortable life. You haven't given me anything, I cut in. I earned my own way. The house? I pay for most of it with my salary while you chased your startup dreams. The comfortable life? I worked for that too. You've been so focused on your big break that you never noticed I was the one holding everything together. Michael's face twisted with rage. You ungrateful. He stopped himself, taking a deep breath. Fine, let's talk about this rationally. What do you want? Name your price to stop the investigation. I almost laughed at his attempt to negotiate. This isn't a business deal, Michael. This is about trust, respect, and consequences. You broke my trust when you tried to steal my inheritance. Now you get to face the consequences. He stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. I heard him stomping around upstairs, drawers opening and closing. A few minutes later, he came back with a packed bag. I'm staying at a hotel, he announced. When you're ready to be reasonable, call me. I watched him leave, feeling oddly calm. This wasn't how I had imagined my marriage ending, but in a way, it felt inevitable. Michael had shown his true colors, and there was no going back from that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and financial discussions. The audit revealed exactly what I had suspected. Michael had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for years, using it to fund his startup while covering up the transfers with creative bookkeeping. Sarah was ruthless in pursuing every detail, every discrepancy. Your grandmother warned me about him, she told me during one of our meetings. She said he reminded her of your grandfather, charming, ambitious, but with no moral compass when it came to money. I hadn't known much about my grandfather. He had left Gran when my mother was young, taking most of their savings with him. Gran had rebuilt everything from scratch, turning her small real estate investments into a thriving business. Why didn't she tell me? I asked Sarah. She tried, in her way, Sarah replied gently, but she knew you had to learn some lessons for yourself. That's why she set up the trust the way she did, to protect you when you needed it most. As the investigation continued, RevTech's investors started pulling out. Michael's dream of Silicon Valley success crumbled as the truth about his financial manipulations came to light. He tried everything. Begging, threatening, attempting to negotiate, but nothing could stop what was coming. One morning, about a month after the failed transfer, I received an email from Sarah. Attached was a preliminary report from the forensic accountants detailing every penny Michael had taken from our joint accounts. The total made me feel sick. Over $300,000 over the past 3 years. I forwarded the report to Michael with a simple message: we need to talk. He showed up at the house that evening, looking haggard and defeated. The confident, ambitious man I had married was gone, replaced by someone who finally realized he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of this situation. I can explain, he started, but I held up my hand. No need, I said. The numbers speak for themselves. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign the divorce papers Sarah has prepared. You're going to repay every penny you took from our joint accounts. And you're going to do it without fighting, unless you want the FBI involved in investigating your creative accounting practices. He slumped in his chair, all pretense of control gone. You're really doing this? Throwing away 8 years of marriage over money? No, I replied firmly. I'm ending our marriage because you proved you can't be trusted. The money is just evidence of that. I did it for us, he tried one last time. Everything I did was to build something better for our future. I shook my head, feeling a mix of pity and disgust. No, Michael. You did it for yourself. You always have. I just wish I had seen it sooner. He signed the papers without another word. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I really thought I could make it work. I know, I replied. That's what makes it so sad. After he left, I sat in my grandmother's old armchair, one of the few pieces of furniture I had insisted on keeping when we bought the house. I could almost hear her voice, wise and gentle. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most important things. She had been right, as usual. I had learned so much from this experience, about trust, about strength, about standing up for myself. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was a final gift from a woman who had faced her own battles and emerged stronger. 6 months later, I sat in Sarah's office, reviewing the final settlement. Michael had repaid most of what he had taken, selling his precious startup to cover the debt. RevTech, his dream of tech glory, was gone, along with most of his reputation in the industry. Your grandmother would be proud, Sarah said, closing the file. You handled this exactly as she would have. I smiled, thinking of Gran's strength, her wisdom, her unwavering belief in doing what was right. I had a good teacher, I replied. That evening, I visited Gran's grave again, bringing fresh lilies. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery, but I felt lighter than I had in months. You were right, Gran, I said softly, arranging the flowers. About everything. The trust, Michael, the importance of protecting what's yours. I finally understand all the lessons you tried to teach me. A warm breeze rustled the flowers, and I could almost hear her laugh, strong and clear. Of course I was right, my dear. Now, what are you going to do with everything you've learned? I smiled, touching the cool marble of her headstone one last time before standing. I had plans. Big ones. The inheritance wasn't just going to sit in a trust-gathering dust. I was going to use it the way Gran had intended, to build something of my own, something lasting. Michael had been wrong about one thing. The money didn't need to be put to good use by him. It already had a purpose, empowering me to create my own legacy, just like my grandmother had done. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past year had been challenging, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Gran's legacy lived on, not just in the trust she had left me, but in the lessons she had taught me about strength, independence, and standing up for what was right. This wasn't the end of my story, it was just the beginning. And this time, I was writing it on my own terms.
Hello, my name is Cheryl. I'm a 33-year-old writer, and my first mystery novel was a huge success. I've been married to my husband Thomas for 8 years, and we have a 7-year-old son named Gary. At first, Thomas had a job, but he quit a few years ago when my writing career took off. This allowed him to stay at home, although he sometimes went out to play slot machines. Lately, I've been dealing with a troubling situation. Thomas has been having an affair and buying expensive gifts for his mistress using my credit card. I've put up with this for our son's sake, but now it's too much for me to handle. One morning, Thomas put on a suit, which was strange since he was unemployed. When I asked him about it, he seemed surprised but then said he was going for a job interview and might start contributing financially again. I wished him luck, hoping this was a positive change. However, my trust wavered when you returned home at 2 a.m., leaving me awake and filled with doubts. While working late to meet a deadline, my heart sank when Thomas came home well past midnight, reeking of alcohol and perfume. He collapsed on the living room sofa, his phone in his hand, unlocked. Driven by suspicion and disbelief, I looked at his phone. The texts I saw confirmed my fears. Thomas was having an affair. The pain was even worse when I realized his lover was my close friend, Gloria. The messages showed they had dined at a fancy restaurant known for its romantic views, a place he had never taken me. The shock hit me hard, and tears filled my eyes as I dealt with the betrayal of two people I trusted deeply. Gloria, who was married herself, had always been a confidant. In quiet turmoil, I quickly forwarded the evidence to my phone, needing time to think and plan my next steps carefully. The next morning, Thomas acted like nothing had happened. I approached him casually and said, "Hey, Thomas, about yesterday. You said you had an interview but came home quite late. What happened?" He avoided eye contact, clearly searching for an excuse. "Actually, I ran into a friend after the interview, and we ended up going for a drink," he muttered. "A friend? Someone I don't know?" I probed, even though I already knew the answer. "I don't have to explain everything, do I?" He snapped back. "Yeah, you're right," I replied, feeling frustrated and resigned. His evasion confirmed my worst fears about his ongoing deceit with Gloria. A month after discovering the painful truth about Thomas' affair, I was still struggling with what to do. Confronting him could mean the end of our marriage. In different circumstances, I might have shown him the evidence and filed for divorce already. But our son Gary, only 7 years old, was my main concern. I couldn't bear the thought of taking his father away from him at such a young age. Meanwhile, Thomas seemed to take advantage of my busy schedule. He started leaving the house more often while I was consumed with writing in my room. This hurt, but it also gave me a chance to gather more evidence of his infidelity. During one of his outings, I went through his belongings and found receipts for luxury women's items, none of which were in our home or given to me. It was clear he was buying these for Gloria, but the source of the funds was confusing since he had no job and was living off my earnings. I didn't have much extra money left for extravagant expenses, but I needed to find out more about what was going on. I decided to follow Thomas, but first, I needed someone to look after Gary. I called my brother, who didn't know anything about the situation. "I'm sorry for calling you over so suddenly," I apologized when he arrived. "No, I don't mind, but what's up? You suddenly said you want me to look after Gary, he said, looking confused. There's something I really need to go shopping for on my own, I explained, making up a story. Shopping? You've never been materialistic. You usually shop online, he said, sounding skeptical. I know, I replied, feeling a little guilty for lying. But I knew it was necessary to protect my family and uncover the full extent of Thomas's betrayal. In the chilly early morning, with my heart heavy with doubt, I asked my brother for a favor. I need to pick something up from a store today, something I can't order online. Can you watch Gary for a bit? I tried to keep my voice light, hiding the real reason I needed to leave the house. Of course, but try to come back soon, okay? Gary might start missing you, my brother responded, concern clear in his voice. Thanks so much, I said, truly grateful despite the turmoil inside me. With my brother's help, I was free to find out the truth about Thomas's activities. Blending into the crowd, I followed Thomas from a safe distance. With each step he took toward his destination, my heart sank further. My worst fears were confirmed when I saw him happily walking into an upscale boutique with Gloria, arm in arm. Seeing them so close was a harsh blow. As they laughed and looked at items, Thomas walked to the cashier. I watched, hidden behind a display, as he confidently handed over a credit card. It was the card from the back of my drawer, meant only for emergencies. This card, which I rarely used, had been his secret tool for making all these extravagant purchases. The realization hit me. I had been so focused on my writing and deadlines that I hadn't been watching our finances closely. Significant charges had built up on the card from my recent work-related expenses, and all this time, Thomas had been adding his deceitful transactions to the bill. Both of our cards were linked to the same account, and I had missed the signs of his betrayal hidden among my expenses. Stunned by the depth of his deceit, I realized Thomas had not only betrayed my trust romantically but had also abused my financial resources. The last bit of affection I had for him disappeared. I blamed myself for not noticing sooner and for allowing his deceit to go unchecked. Realizing this double betrayal was hard to accept and marked a turning point in how I saw our marriage. Despite all the evidence, I couldn't forgive Thomas. With a heavy heart, I took discreet photos of his moments with Gloria before heading home. In the days that followed, I focused on devising a plan to confront him. Whenever he was out, I searched his PC for more clues. Since his phone and computer were linked, I could easily access their communications. It wasn't long before I uncovered plans for a getaway with Gloria over the upcoming holiday, a 6-day trip. This is my chance, I muttered to myself, feeling a mix of determination and despair. I planned to confront Thomas and settle matters while he was away with his lover. However, I faced a big challenge: our son, Gary. I needed to make sure he was protected from the painful truth about his father's affair, and carrying out my plan without him finding out would be tricky. Reluctantly, I decided to ask my brother for help again. I hate to ask, but can you look after Gary during the upcoming holidays? I asked, trying to sound casual. The holidays? You mean all 6 days? He asked, sounding suspicious. Yes, I have something important to handle, I replied, trying to hide my anxiety. Something important, huh? He gave me a look that suggested he knew more than I had told him. His next words caught me off guard. Cheryl, you don't have to handle everything by yourself. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Thomas is cheating, isn't he? He said bluntly. My heart skipped a beat. How did you? I stammered, but he cut me off. I heard it from Gary, he said softly. Gary, my son, knew. Even though he was just a child, he had picked up on enough to realize something was wrong. He had seen his father getting close to someone who wasn't me, and it had upset him. My brother's revelation was a stark reminder of how sensitive and observant children can be. Even at a young age, Gary had sensed the tension and sadness in our home, making the emotional situation even more complicated. I had thought I was shielding Gary from the turmoil at home. Why? My brother pressed gently, his words cutting through my defenses. Thomas's actions have hurt you enough for even Gary to notice. Are you considering staying with him? As I wrestled with the idea of divorce, fearing it would deeply affect Gary, my son unexpectedly walked into the room. It's okay, Mom. I'm on your side, he said, his young voice resolute. I don't want anyone who makes you sad, Mom. As long as I have you, I'm fine. His words, so mature for his age, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Gary, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Turning to my brother, I added, and thank you too. With the support of my son and brother, I found the courage to face what needed to be done. Gary and I began to plan our move, timing it for when Thomas would be away on his trip with Gloria. My brother helped us pack discreetly, making sure everything was ready for a swift departure. The evening before Thomas was set to leave, I decided it was time to confront him directly. I found him packing a suitcase in our bedroom. Thomas, why are you packing a suitcase? What's going on? I asked, pretending not to know. Oh, this? I'm going on a trip with some friends starting tomorrow, he replied, avoiding my gaze. A trip? Why didn't you mention this earlier? I pushed, trying to get more details. It was a last-minute plan, nothing serious. I'm using my monthly allowance for it, he said dismissively, trying to end the conversation. Despite his discomfort, he continued to hide the truth. I took a deep breath and in a calm, determined voice that I rarely used, I asked, "Are you sure it's just with your friends?" Thomas visibly tensed, his shoulders twitching with nerves. Despite his obvious unease, he stubbornly clung to his lie. "Yes, just friends," he insisted, though his voice wavered. "All right, I understand. Enjoy your trip with your friends," I said, the irony not lost in my tone. "I would have enjoyed it anyway," he muttered, but his assurance sounded forced. With everything laid bare, I knew what needed to be done. My brother, my son, and my resolve had set the stage for a new beginning, free from deceit. Even though Thomas hadn't brought it up, it was essential to be accountable. As I stepped out of my husband's room, wrestling with my thoughts, I reflected on how things might have been different. If he had been truthful from the start, perhaps we could have parted amicably, discussing alimony and child support. Despite his betrayal, there was a time when my love for him was deep. He had been my rock when my novel initially failed to make an impact. I didn't want to feel bitter towards Thomas, but I had to protect myself and my son. It was clear that it was time for me to make a decisive move and not hold back any longer, especially after discovering more of his lies. The next morning, after Thomas left for his trip, I checked the drawer and saw that he had taken my credit card again. I acted quickly, calling the credit card company to report it as lost and had it canceled. When my son woke up, his eyes sparkled with excitement. He asked, "Mom, today's the day, right? The day we moved to our new house?" Any lingering doubts I had vanished in that moment. "Yes, Gary," I smiled, reassured by his enthusiasm. "I've canceled the credit card, and now it's time for us to start fresh in our new home." With my brother's help, the move was easy. We took our belongings to our new house while my husband's things were sent elsewhere. The next day, as we settled into our new place with my son and brother, I felt a profound sense of peace and excitement for the future. When Thomas called, his voice sounded hesitant. "Hello, Cheryl. Well, this trip is turning out to be more expensive than I thought. Could you send me some money?" I immediately knew he was having money troubles because I had frozen the credit card. He was trying to avoid admitting the truth about using the card without permission, and his indirect request for money was annoying. "Did you plan for this trip on your own?" I asked calmly. "I'm sorry, but I can't give you any money." He sounded frustrated. "Don't be like that. If you don't help me, I'll be the only one not enjoying this trip," he said. Then he corrected himself. "I mean, you'll be the only one." Even over the phone, his confusion was obvious. "You're on a trip, and you want to show off the good parts, right? Well, the card you took is no longer valid, so you'll have to manage." "What are you talking about, Cheryl? What card?" He pretended not to know. "Pretending you don't know won't help," I said firmly. "You're panicking because you're saying things that don't make sense. I don't know anything about a card." "Enough," I exclaimed, my patience wearing thin. "I already know you've been cheating on me with my best friend, Gloria. Did you think I had no idea? It's obvious." "No, it's not what you think. I'm not cheating," he tried to assure me, his voice desperate. I was furious that he continued to deny everything. Standing there with my brother and son next to me, all my pent-up anger erupted. "Stop making excuses. You had a family and you cheated with another woman, and you've been using someone else's credit card. Do you even realize how despicable your actions are?" "Cheryl, let's calm down for a moment," he tried to soothe, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. How can I remain calm when I'm dealing with the person I despise the most? I seethed into the phone. "Just so you're aware, I have no intention of forgiving you or offering you any help. As for her, she can find her way elsewhere. Never show your face to Gary and me again." With those final words, I hung up on my husband. Moments later, his mistress, Gloria, called. "Hey, Cheryl, what on earth did you do?" "Ah, Gloria, long time no see. How's your trip going with my husband?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Shut up and explain yourself. What are you talking about?" she snapped back. "Don't play dumb. You received Thomas's things at your house, didn't you?" I replied. When we moved out, I had arranged for all my husband's belongings to be sent directly to Gloria's address. Since Gloria was also married, her husband was naturally there to receive the delivery. That's why I sent everything there, along with a detailed letter explaining the whole situation. She yelled back, her voice cracking under stress. "This isn't a joke. What have you done?" My husband found out, and now he's furious. "Well, you brought this upon yourself by choosing to have an affair while married. You were supposed to be my friend, and this is a betrayal," I retorted. "You're the worst. I misjudged you," she accused. "Excuse me? That's rich coming from you. My best friend having an affair with my husband. How could you expect any forgiveness? I didn't mean it seriously, it was just a joke. I would never actually be interested in someone like him, she tried to downplay it. I don't care if it was a joke or not. I'm filing for divorce anyway, and yes, you did have an affair. That's a fact. I'll never forgive you and I'll be seeking significant compensation, so be prepared. Compensation? What are you talking about? I didn't agree to anything like that, she protested. Well, you're going to hear about it soon enough. It's what you deserve, I concluded as she realized the gravity of the situation. I'm a housewife. I can't pay any compensation, she pleaded, her voice filled with desperation. I don't care. Figure it out yourself or ask your husband, though I doubt he'll be much help, I said sharply. Oh, wait. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and promptly blocked her number. Later, I contacted my lawyer to finalize my divorce and sought compensation from my ex-husband and Gloria, along with child support. I also demanded repayment for the unauthorized credit card charges. The financial strain was too much for Gloria's marriage. After settling the compensation, her husband filed for divorce, and she found herself without a home. She sought refuge with her parents, but they were disappointed by her actions and turned her away. With limited options, Gloria now lives where she works, taking up night shifts at a local bar. Thomas, too, sought comfort from Gloria during this turbulent time, but overwhelmed by her crisis and furious with him for causing her divorce, she ended their relationship. Thomas is now juggling several part-time jobs, struggling to make ends meet. His long period of unemployment has hindered his ability to find stable work. Should he ever fall behind on his alimony or child support payments, I am prepared to pursue what he owes without hesitation. As for myself, life has settled into a peaceful rhythm in our new home with my son. He's growing up fast, and each day is filled with new joys and adventures. My primary focus is on providing him with all the love and stability he needs, ensuring he never has to face the kind of turmoil we've gone through again. Our days are brighter now, and I'm committed to making sure they stay that way.
My name is Amy, and I'm 33 years old. I started a business during my college years, and through hard work, I became the CEO. Over time, I expanded the company to achieve an impressive annual turnover of $3 million. Unfortunately, my husband and I were unable to have children. He mocked me for this, calling me barren throughout our marriage. To make matters worse, he fathered a child with another woman and decided to marry her. Despite his own infidelity, he continued to demean me until the end. His cruel remarks cut deep. He once told me, "Go get some fertility treatment. It's a joke to live your whole life alone. And you have the nerve to say that after having an affair, it's true you can't get pregnant. No one will marry someone like you." I had finally reached the breaking point. A few days ago, I filed for divorce. I've moved back to my parents' house, while my soon-to-be ex-husband remains in the home we shared. He contacted me to remove my belongings because he plans to live there with his new partner. Today is likely the last day I'll see him, and he stayed true to form with his sarcasm. The future bride is coming. The barren woman should pack up and leave. Your presence will make her uncomfortable, he said. This was my home too, I retorted. Why should I rush out for your cheating and remarried partner? The divorce is already final. Such clingy remarks are disgraceful. We agreed that I continue living here, so you have no reason to stay. Hurry up. I was going to leave anyway. Good luck finding a new man to support you. Oh, but a barren woman like you remarrying is impossible. His continued sarcasm was astounding. I had grown accustomed to his contempt, but his nasty remarks still grated on me. I knew I had made the right decision to divorce. As I sighed, I wondered why I had ever married him. We met by chance at a cafe near our workplace, and after his persistent pursuit, we started dating. I had always been focused on my work, with little involvement in romance, often feeling betrayed and hurt. Despite this, I still hoped for a family and children in the future. As a CEO with a $3 million revenue, I was frequently approached for my money, which I despised. To avoid this, I lied to my husband, claiming to be a low-income contract worker, and even used a subsidiary's business card to hide my true status. He said he fell in love with me at first sight and pursued me relentlessly. Little did I know he would turn into such a sarcastic person. As years went by, it became clear that a man's interest would wane for a younger, more attractive woman, and my husband proved that when he started an affair right after our marriage. He even fathered a child with his lover. When he asked for a divorce, I accepted immediately. Assuming I was financially poor, he never discussed dividing assets. Instead, when he and his mistress came to apologize for his infidelity, they quickly offered compensation for my mental distress. Amy, you're a contract worker, aren't you? in a worse position than me, childless and abandoned. A younger woman has taken your husband and child to remarry. I'm terribly sorry. We'll definitely pay the compensation, his mistress said. Indeed, my husband added, infertility treatments cost money, and I will pay my share too. Despite their promises, their words were laced with scorn, fueling my anger. His mistress, a charming woman 8 years younger than me, was eager to have a child and become a housewife. When my husband wasn't around, I asked her if she planned to continue working. She firmly replied that she intended to quit after taking a 3-year maternity leave to get money from the company, rather than quitting right after marriage. But isn't that inconvenient for the company? I asked. Well, I became a full-time employee to get all the benefits, right? It's not uncommon for people not to return after maternity leave. You're too serious, Amy. You need to be smarter about this. It's probably why your husband left you, she retorted sarcastically. I was seething with irritation. I had no problem with being a housewife, but I couldn't empathize with someone who so thoughtlessly inconveniences others. My husband, oblivious to her disregard, had continued to belittle me. Infertile women should hurry up and get treatment. Your looks are your only asset, and they're fading with age too, he'd sneer. Who are you talking about? I asked, feeling a surge of defiance. You, the infertile woman, he replied with contempt. In response, I pulled out some documents from an envelope. What's this? He demanded, unable to hide his agitation. Inside were 3 documents I had carefully gathered, each meant to shock him. After years of mockery, betrayal, and listening to him brag about his affair and remarriage, my anger had reached its peak. I didn't want his compensation money. I was determined to get my revenge and leave him unsettled. You kept calling me infertile. So I got tested. Here are the results, I said, placing the documents in front of him. No abnormalities. So who is this infertile woman you keep talking about? Maybe the issue lies with you. This is ridiculous, he stammered. It has to be her. Despite our efforts, we never managed to have kids. Even if you say there's nothing wrong with you, I managed to have a child with her. I wasn't even trying, and she got pregnant right away. He looked visibly confused, as if the fear that his infertility might be the cause and the suspicion that the child might not be his were overwhelming him. Well, it's too convenient that she got pregnant so quickly when we couldn't. She's young and cute, but could it be someone else's child? He muttered, his shock evident. You haven't been tested, have you? I said. It might actually be your child. Don't be so pessimistic. I tried to console him, but he seemed to have convinced himself of his own infertility. Disturbed, he immediately contacted his lover, insisting they needed to talk. What did she say? I asked. She's coming over now, he replied. That's good, I said in a deliberately cheerful tone. If you can confirm it's your child, you'll feel relieved, right? After a moment, he pulled out another document from an envelope. It was a detective's report. This photo. It's me. When was this taken? And this one, right after we got married. Did you know about this all along? Yes, I said calmly. I've known about your infidelity for years, long before you ever admitted to it. That's why I wasn't surprised when you confessed your affair. At the time when I was happiest in our marriage, you were already involved with someone else. Why didn't you say something sooner? If you knew, you should have talked to me. I feel like a fool for not seeing it. Why should I be the one getting scolded? I've been turning a blind eye to your affairs. You should actually be thankful. Hiring a detective right after we got married, that's just pathetic. It's clear you never trusted me at all. I'm shocked, but I know divorcing was the right decision. In the end, you were deceiving me too. We were betraying each other, so it's only fair. When we decided to get married, I was completely carefree and didn't think to conduct a background check on you. I submitted the marriage registration without truly knowing you. We were newlyweds, affectionate and intimate, but even if it wasn't a marriage of convenience, it's never a loss to understand your partner's background. So just to be cautious, I requested an investigation a few months after our marriage. That investigation unexpectedly revealed your infidelity. I was shocked, as there were no signs of cheating before. But I didn't fall into despair. I wasn't obsessed with you. I married you because you courted me. Yes, I loved you, but only because you cherished and loved me. I wasn't going to cling to a husband who didn't care about me. I wasn't deeply hurt. I was just astonished that you could be with me while seeing other women. I told you this to set the record straight. From the beginning of our marriage, my career was my top priority, and I didn't want to get bogged down with divorce proceedings or negotiating alimony right away. Instead, I chose to focus on my work, which is why I continued to ignore your infidelity. When I revealed this to you, you responded with, "But weren't we trying to have a child?" What would you have done if you had gotten pregnant? Were you planning to raise it together even though you knew about the affair? Yes, I said. A child is a gift from God, and we can't control everything. I lied. The truth was, I pretended to be trying to conceive with you because you wanted a child. After your infidelity came to light, I secretly took birth control pills. Honestly, I was reluctant to start a family with an unfaithful husband and anticipated that we would eventually divorce. To avoid pregnancy, I secretly continued using birth control. Ultimately, the fact that we didn't have children was a planned outcome. While I had some fantasies about having kids, I wasn't strongly motivated to do so. Even with a babysitter, I knew that parenting would distract from my work focus. I went along with my husband's desire to have a child, but I had no obligation to undergo pregnancy and childbirth for a man who deceived me. In short, we weren't infertile. I was just using birth control and didn't bother to tell him because it seemed too troublesome. Unaware of this, my husband mistakenly believed he was infertile and thought his mistress was pregnant by another man. As we discussed this, his mistress arrived at our house for the first time since the alimony negotiations. She was the type who easily attracted men and was often disliked by women, and today was no different. "Hello, Amy, you're here to collect all your things, right? I appreciate the trouble you're going through," she said, her tone dripping with contempt, clearly reveling in having taken my husband. I replied sarcastically, "I should be thanking you. You're taking over my hand-me-down husband and house." Her smile faltered at my response. As we continued our exchange, my husband seemed increasingly agitated and anxious. He interrupted our conversation. "Hey, I might be infertile. Isn't it strange that we couldn't have a child?" "What are you talking about all of a sudden? That's impossible. Has someone been feeding you nonsense? We're getting married. Your previous wife was the one with infertility issues, right?" "No, she wasn't infertile," I said calmly, pulling out the test results. "It's hard to discuss, but we were genuinely trying to have a child. If neither of us had issues, it wouldn't be unusual if we succeeded. But we did. Yet for us to have a child without realizing it, something's off. Maybe it's because you and I weren't meant to be. Your previous marriage just wasn't meant to work. Let's stop this pointless conversation. Doubting me is only going to stress me out and affect her baby." My husband's suspicions about his mistress extended beyond infertility. He pulled out a photo from an envelope and demanded, "What is this supposed to be?" The photo showed his mistress cozying up with another male colleague. After discovering his infidelity, I had hired a detective to investigate her as well. It turned out she had been involved with several men at work. Along with a photo of her with another colleague, there were also pictures of her heading to hotels with other partners. The mistress turned pale at the sight of the photos. "What is this?" she gasped, clearly stunned. "I had you investigated too," I told her. "It's truly deplorable how many men you've been involved with at work. I had this evidence long before you started talking about remarriage. Every time my husband mentioned you, I couldn't help but laugh inside at the absurdity of deciding to marry while being unaware of your infidelity. I'm truly astounded. If you knew, you should have told me sooner. I wouldn't have married this woman and we wouldn't have ended up divorced. If the infertility was my fault, I would have sought treatment to have a child with you," my husband exclaimed, his attitude shifting dramatically upon learning about his mistress's multiple affairs. "Please, what are you saying now? The child in my belly is growing every day, and these photos are from so long ago. Don't bring them up now. Since conceiving your child, you're the only one for me. I wouldn't even consider remarriage if I didn't love you. Is there any proof that the child is actually mine? It could be someone else's. If you're so sure, show me the evidence. The men in these photos are all my juniors. If the child's theirs, I refuse to raise it." "The child was conceived after we slept together," I said firmly. "It's obviously yours. The introductions to our parents are done. There's no turning back now. We haven't filed the marriage registration, so this is our last chance to start over and clarify the truth." After a heated argument with my husband, his mistress turned her hostility towards me. We were living peacefully until my ex-wife brought these photos. "We've settled our discussions and paid the alimony. Why interfere now? It's pitiful for a discarded wife to still cause a fuss. You always mock me for being older, I retorted. But is that all you can say? Perhaps it's because youth is all you have. I wasn't obsessed with my husband, and hearing about the remarriage didn't hurt me much. Your attacks are meaningless. Had I not exposed your affairs, you would have continued to hide them from him. I thought it was kinder not to have secrets between spouses. Kindness? That's rich coming from you. These photos have only caused chaos. We could have been happy otherwise. You're terrible, the mistress retorted, visibly shaken. Wait a minute, were you really planning to keep hiding this from me? I can't believe a woman with such nerve. Let's reconsider the remarriage. My husband was clearly rattled by the mistress's betrayal. I was taken aback by this turn of events as well, but I couldn't help but think that if their relationship was this fragile, it was doomed from the start. I paid alimony to you, justifying my relationship with him. If it's going to be nullified, I should have just denied the affair from the beginning, I said. Calling off the remarriage now is unthinkable. Upon hearing this, my lover responded. About that alimony, I accepted it at the time, but I donated all of it afterward. I have enough money as it is. I never wanted to keep any money from you too, so I don't appreciate being talked down to as if you did me a favor with that amount. What? Don't talk big when your income is probably enough to cover that small amount, the mistress snapped. That alimony nearly wiped out my savings. Donating it is just a joke, right? If that was the case, you should have said you didn't want it from the start. No, my husband interjected. She's just a contract worker in our subsidiary. Her income is clearly less than ours, so that's obviously a lie. If you really have that much money, marry me again and support me. My husband spoke with disbelief, still mocking me. You know, I had planned to support you after a few years of marriage. So when I heard you were divorcing me to remarry a younger woman, I thought it was foolish. Stop with the nonsense. Actually, I said calmly, there's something I've been hiding. Look inside this envelope. As I spoke, my husband pulled out a photo from the envelope. It was a picture of the board of directors of the group company he works for. His expression turned to shock as he saw the image. The mistress's eyes widened in recognition. Isn't that this lady? She asked incredulously. Is this a fake? Of course it's not a fake, I replied. The person at the center of the photo is me. I'm the president of your parent company. Sorry for keeping it a secret. Wait a minute, the mistress exclaimed. You're supposed to be just a contract worker at our subsidiary, and I thought the president of the parent company was a man. Stop lying. Yes, I used a pseudonym at the company, I admitted. When I started my business as a student, I faced frequent dismissal simply because I was a woman. To navigate these challenges, I used a male pseudonym and kept my identity private. My father acted as a director and spokesperson in the media while I pretended to be a contract worker. This strategy helped me avoid the scrutiny and potential jealousy that might arise from being a female president. I intended to reveal my true identity to you eventually. I had enough funds to support us, but saying my parents were dead was also a lie. My father is my business partner and my mother is well and living at home. Only the top executives knew the truth, so it's natural that you, as a subsidiary employee, wouldn't have been aware of it. When I disclosed this, their faces turned pale. My husband pleaded, I don't know if the child is mine. I'll cancel the remarriage. Please, I beg you, cancel the divorce. I really wanted a child with you. You were just insulting me and calling me a baroness, I responded coolly. The divorce papers have already been filed. It's impossible to cancel now. Do you understand who you're speaking to? With a smile, I added, as the president of the parent company, I've resolved to address this situation publicly to protect my valuable employees from being deceived by your behavior. The mistress, who had been mocking me as an older woman, suddenly shifted her tone and apologized. I'm sorry for trying to take your husband. If you wish, I'll return him to you. Please forgive me. I replied, he's my hand-me-down, so I don't need him returned. By the way, I need to announce the pregnancy within the company once it's stable. The mistress's face went even wider at this news. Please, could you not do that? Why would it cause problems if the company knows? I asked her sarcastically, do you think it wouldn't be a problem? It's likely that you're still involved with others in the company. If exposed, you face backlash from those men and find yourself in a difficult situation. I resolved to make the situation public. The next day, I went to the office and revealed that I, the president, am a woman and that my husband had an affair, divorced me, and had a child with his mistress. The revelation caused a stir among the employees, with many whispering about the scandal. As a result, my husband lost his credibility at work and became a target of criticism. He found himself in a difficult working environment. The mistress was also exposed for having relationships with multiple men at the company. She faced the wrath of those men, who were furious after receiving expensive gifts from her under false pretenses. Although the scandal could have led to lawsuits, it didn't go to court. The mistress managed to deflect blame and claimed the gifts were hers. Upon learning the full story, my father advised the mistress to consider leaving the company. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was ordered to transfer to a remote branch in Indonesia, a place few would willingly go. The mistress decided to accompany him there to raise their child together. Both their families refused to acknowledge their grandchild due to the scandal and their disrespect toward the president. In Indonesia, they faced the challenge of raising their child without family support. My ex-husband harbored growing distrust over the child's paternity and wanted a DNA test, but the mistress insisted there was no such facility in Indonesia, avoiding the test. Despite not wanting to remarry my husband, driven by his desire for a child and pressure from the mistress, ended up marrying her. However, the reality of married life was not as easy as he had imagined. The mistress, who had seen my husband as the top choice among the men she had been involved with, was now content living as a housewife. She claimed that she chose him for his high position. As for me, I've remained in the media spotlight as a female entrepreneur, leading a busy and fulfilling life. The company's stock price surged, and I continue to lead with success and resilience. After my mother passed away, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law started visiting every time I was alone at home. It was strange how they would come over and act like it was my duty to entertain them, even though they had made the effort to visit. Their presence felt like an imposition, and I ended up ordering delivery because they expected me to cover the cost. My sister-in-law would laugh loudly, as if finding amusement in the situation. This painful routine had been ongoing for 2 years. With my son and daughter away at university, it was just my husband and me at home. One day, Tony told me something shocking. His parents' and sister's family would be moving in next week. He even suggested that I should move out because I was in the way. This was my house, and I had no intention of leaving. Determined to take action, I agreed to tidy up, but had already started making plans. Tony, unaware of my intentions, left for a business trip. I quickly set my plan into motion and had everything prepared before his return. I looked forward to seeing the surprise on Tony's face when he came back. My name is Nikki. I'm 48 years old and live as a housewife in my family home in the countryside. After high school, I moved to New York for university and stayed to work and live a single life. During a visit home, I attended a matchmaking event for local revitalization, despite having no intention of returning to the countryside. The locals persuaded me, and my reluctance led me to attend. Among the men there, one quietly sat beside me, Tony, my now husband. Feeling awkward alone, I struck up a conversation with him. Despite his few words, his sincerity attracted me. At that time, I was single and not in a high position at my company. My father had passed away, and I had no siblings. My mother lived alone. Growing tired of life in New York, I started considering that returning to the countryside and getting married might not be a bad idea. Eventually, I married Tony and moved back to the countryside to live in my parents' home. Tony agreed to live with my mother, as his sister Sarah was already living with her husband in his parents' home. We had a son and a daughter, and our married life seemed smooth. However, after my mother's death and the children leaving for university, I faced unexpected difficulties. Tony, a man of few words, had always kept to himself and stayed uninvolved in parenting. I had been close to my mother, and her support had made parenting manageable. But after she passed away, I was left with just Tony, and our life took a turn for the worse. Tony's behavior changed drastically. He started referring to me as you or hey instead of using my name and began acting arrogantly, a stark contrast to his former quiet demeanor. He would lounge around in the living room, making demands like, if you're not doing anything, at least make some coffee. His new attitude made me feel like a fool. He never used to lie down outside the bedroom, but now he seemed to disregard all the respect we once had. I can't help but wonder what triggered such a drastic change in Tony. Perhaps he had been considerate of my mother because she was his mother-in-law, but his current arrogant and dismissive attitude is something I've never seen before. It seems like he's spreading his wings now that she's no longer here, but this transformation has been startling. Even our children, who visit occasionally, have been taken aback by his new behavior. When the kids come home, Tony is so engrossed in the TV that he doesn't even move from the living room. If they try to change the channel, he snaps at them. "Hey, what are you doing? Go away." His harsh demeanor clearly upsets them. Given that our home was usually just me and my mother, it's uncomfortable for them to see their father acting so rudely. As a result, they stopped coming home as frequently, except for the Christmas holidays. Finally, I reached my limit and gently asked him, "Hey, what's going on with you lately? You used to be so calm." Tony's response was sharp and defensive. "What do you mean? What's gotten into me? You seem to always be on edge since around the time Mom passed away. I was considerate because she was your mother, but now that she's gone, I'm the head of this house. It's normal to get angry if something displeases me," he grumbled, his face more intimidating than I'd ever seen. I involuntarily took a step back. It's clear that the stress of accommodating my mother was a factor, but I never expected Tony to change so dramatically. Since then, I've had to be extremely cautious around him. My life has been challenging since my mother's death. I work part-time until 3 p.m. and then handle household chores when I get home. Where we used to enjoy our time together, now it feels incredibly gloomy. When I walk in, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are always waiting at the entrance. "Oh, Nikki, you're quite late," they'd say. "We've been waiting outside in the cold for 30 minutes. I heard you finish work at 3 o'clock, so we came over at that time. Why are you so late?" They knew my part-time job ends at 3 o'clock, and that I come home around this time every day. My husband's parents and his sister's family all live together. Sarah, my sister-in-law, changed her last name to Timpson when she married, but she and her husband live with her parents. Sarah, who has no children and has never worked, was close to my mother-in-law when my mother was alive. I once thought they were kind, but their attitude shifted drastically after my mother passed away. "I'm sorry I'm late. I was out shopping," I said. I didn't dare show any irritation, fearing more criticism. In this situation, I always have to invite them into my home as soon as I arrive, then organize my shopping and change clothes. But my mother-in-law immediately starts complaining. "Your husband's mother and sister went out of their way to come here, and you're not doing anything for us. That's just crazy. I guess we have no choice but to order delivery. You'll pay for it, right?" Sarah laughed loudly, finding something amusing in the situation. As always, I ended up paying. This ongoing discomfort has lasted for 2 years. I've even talked to my husband about it, but he never helps. "Mom and Sarah are just trying to be nice because they think you're still upset about losing your mom. It's not good to complain," he said. "But I'm always the one footing the bill for their deliveries, which puts us in the red every month. You could manage our finances better or find a higher-paying part-time job. Besides, you seem to care about your own family but are cold towards mine." His words left me stunned. I don't want to quit my current part-time job because my coworkers are nice, and although I live in my parents' house, I've never neglected my in-laws. I've attended family gatherings and brought gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. They used to be kind to me, so why did their attitude change so suddenly after my mother's death? I felt overwhelmed and stressed, unsure how to handle the situation. Then, one night after returning from work, my husband dropped a bombshell. "Next week, my parents and sister's family are moving in, so clear out your room," he said abruptly. "What? That's so sudden." I was confused and panicked. "They're moving in this Saturday. Get ready quickly," he added, dismissing my distress. With only 3 days left, this major decision had been made without any consultation with me, just decided by him and his family. "Wait a minute, you can't just make such an important decision on your own. This is my house," I protested. "Shut up. I've decided because I'm the head of this house now. Don't complain," he snapped, leaving me stunned. I accidentally dropped a dish I was washing, and it shattered. "You're really clumsy. That's why it's such a hassle to be with you," he said coldly, catching me off guard. He added sarcastically, "Let me be clear. My mom and sister like this house and want to live here, but they don't like you. I don't want to be with you either, so you should leave." "Yeah, so like I said, pack up all your stuff. I'll be on a business trip for the next 3 days, so finish it before then," he ordered, his treatment filled with anger. I resolved to take immediate action. Fine, I'll pack everything up, I said, my resolve hardening. Tony smirked. Clearly pleased. I thought you'd resist more, but you're surprisingly obedient, he said, seeming satisfied that his plan was going smoothly. Little did he know, I had my own plans for payback. The next day, while my husband was away on his business trip, I followed through with my plan. I made the necessary phone calls and completed all the preparations. I left the house before Tony could return, imagining his surprise when he came back. My destination was my daughter Lily's apartment in New York, where she lives alone. I had informed her 3 nights ago. Mom, I've been waiting. Are you done with the procedures? Lily asked. Yes, everything is perfect. Sorry for coming over so suddenly, I replied. I hugged Lily and reassured her, it's okay. Besides, Dad's way of doing things is terrible, trying to kick you out of the house like that. She smiled and replied, well, before I came here, I got back at him. He's going to be surprised later. We both laughed. My visit to Lily's was part of a plan. Later that night, as expected, Tony called, his voice full of frustration. What kind of joke is this? There's nothing in the house. Where did all the furniture and appliances go? I calmly responded, I meant to clear out everything from your room, not the entire house. Tony's confusion was evident. Initially, I told you to clear out your room, but now you've removed all my belongings, he said, his frustration growing. I replied, you wanted me to leave, right? So I got rid of all the furniture and appliances I inherited from my mother. Now your family can move in without any hesitation. I explained that I had arranged for a recycling company to take away the furniture and appliances and had movers transport our children's belongings and my own to Lily's apartment. Though it was a hassle for Lily, she was eager to help me get back at him. After a moment of stunned silence, Tony spoke again, his tone now confused. Actually, the story about my parents' and sister's family moving in was a lie. Both my mother and sister are on the verge of divorce. They were planning to take refuge at your place. Oh, really? I said, my tone indifferent. You didn't think I'd know about their situation? Tony sounded a bit upset. You already knew. Of course, I said calmly. Over the past few days, I had been in touch with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, Robert, so I was fully aware of the turmoil in Tony's family. Robert, originally from New York, had attended a matchmaking event in my hometown. I had also participated in the matchmaking event where Robert, who had shown interest in Sarah, was smitten by her. Under strong persuasion from Sarah's mother, Robert ended up marrying her. Unfortunately, after their marriage, Sarah and her mother became increasingly selfish. Sarah was pampered by my mother-in-law, causing Robert a lot of trouble, especially since they began coming to my house every day. Sarah stopped preparing dinner, relying on us for meals. This situation continued for 2 years until my father-in-law, fed up with the situation, ordered my mother-in-law and Sarah to leave their house. When Robert informed me of this, I felt a sense of relief. However, when Tony learned that his mother and Sarah were about to be evicted, he decided to invite them to our home. While Tony claimed he was on a business trip, he was actually pleading with his father to forgive his mother and sister. Since his father refused, Tony reluctantly helped them pack their belongings. They planned to move to our house with only the bare minimum of their possessions, which meant we would have to manage without furniture or appliances. When I shared this with Tony, I heard a voice on the other end of the phone saying, well, that's a cunning wife. It turned out my mother-in-law had been eavesdropping on our conversation. Nikki, what should we do? How are we supposed to live in a house with nothing? She asked, sounding distressed. And it's terrible of you to contact my husband without permission, Sarah added, clearly upset. I responded, actually, I also asked your husband for help. I requested that he forgive the 2 of you. He said if you reflect properly, you can come back tomorrow. Sarah and my mother-in-law seemed to cheer up as if imagining a happy reunion. Nikki, let's forget about what happened earlier. You're not so bad after all, they said, trying to make amends. Tony, who had brought the 2 women home, looked visibly disappointed. So the issue with them is resolved. But what about me? At least return our home appliances, I said. Oh, about that, I continued. While I was cleaning up, I also arranged to sell the house. So could you please move out soon? What? Wait a minute, Tony exclaimed, shocked. I'm your husband. How can you treat me like this? I calmly replied, you tried to kick me out of the house, so I don't see why you think this is unfair. Your actions were pretty terrible too. Tony was left speechless, unable to counter my argument. I added, "Oh, and your belongings are still in the house. Check the small drawer in the bedroom. I've already completed my part, so make sure you handle yours." I could hear Tony's footsteps on the other end of the phone, moving towards the bedroom. After a door slammed shut, he said, "What? These are copies of the petition for divorce and the summons?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Please fill out your part and submit the response to the court." Tony's disbelief was palpable. "This is a joke. Why do I have to get divorced? You said you wanted me to leave. Isn't that the same as breaking up?" He was clearly shocked by how his actions had backfired. Silence followed, and soon I heard Tony's sobs. In a tearful voice, he pleaded, "Please, I was wrong. I will cherish you from now on. Can't we start over? Please believe me." Despite his desperate pleas, I couldn't overlook his actions, prioritizing his family over me and trying to force me out of the house. I was willing to accept his mother and Sarah, but he should have at least discussed it with me. How could I trust a husband who so easily chose his mother and sister over his wife? His apology did nothing to change my mind. The next morning, I received a call from Sarah. "Nikki, you tricked me. When I got home, neither my father nor Robert were there, and the house has already been sold." I responded calmly, "I didn't lie to you. I said you could return. But I never mentioned that your father and husband would be there waiting." Sarah and her mother complained bitterly over the phone. Then suddenly, her mother exclaimed, "How could this be?" I guess they had discovered the envelope in the mailbox, which contained a letter from my father-in-law. The letter included the filled-out petition for divorce and the summons. From what I had heard, my father-in-law had been fed up with his wife's selfish behavior and had considered moving to a care home alone. This incident pushed him to finally sell the house. Robert, unable to tolerate Sarah's selfishness, decided to divorce her and return to his parents in Enmai. "Do something, Nikki, or we'll lose our house," Sarah pleaded. "That's not my problem," I replied. "Why don't you apologize to your husband? It might not be too late." Sarah's pride, however, prevented her from apologizing. I could hear her sobbing while her mother tried to console her. Then her mother, apparently grabbing the phone, yelled, "You wicked woman! How could you be so cruel?" Surprised by her sudden outburst, I suspected it was just a bluff. I calmly said my final words, "Understood. Take care, mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Goodbye." I heard a voice from the other end saying, "Wait," but I ignored it and ended the call. I had no intention of dealing with any more of their trouble. Despite their selfish actions leading to this situation, they continued to blame me. Soon, I would be finalizing my divorce from Tony, making them practically strangers to me. I saw no need to involve myself with them any longer. Since Tony was unwilling to initiate the divorce, I had to take legal action. After a lengthy mediation process, we were finally able to proceed with the divorce. Tony requested half of the proceeds from the sale of our house, but his demand was denied as it was not considered shared property. Tony confronted me angrily after the trial, but the judge intervened. I watched as Tony's disappointment grew, feeling no sympathy. If only he had shown any remorse for the constant interference from his mother and Sarah, things might have been different. Ultimately, our marriage ended on the worst possible note. After the divorce, it seemed Tony, along with his divorced mother and Sarah, were struggling to find a place to live. A local friend informed me that they were initially sleeping in the park, using cardboard boxes. Tony reached out for help but eventually fell out of contact, possibly due to his phone service being cut off. Over time, they managed to move into a rundown flat on the outskirts of town. Tony was working to support them, but it was a burden, particularly with his inexperienced mother and Sarah. Despite being of working age, Sarah refused to get a job, likely due to her pride. The constant arguments between his mother and Sarah were disturbing the neighbors. Tony, frustrated by the situation, had turned to gambling, which seemed to be draining most of his earnings. Though it was no longer my concern, I couldn't help feeling a sense of satisfaction hearing about their troubles. As for me, I'm starting a new chapter in New York. Just before the divorce, I had consulted with Robert, who had already divorced Sarah and returned to NY, about my future. Through his connections, I secured a position at a food-related company run by Robert's brother. Initially, I stayed with my daughter, but with Robert's help, I found a new apartment and now live independently in a small flat. I'm deeply grateful for all the support from Robert. We share similar painful experiences and have found common ground, which has brought us closer. Perhaps our meeting at that matchmaking event was fate. Although I now live far from my hometown, I always keep it in my heart. I had been secretly concerned that marriages would become less common and that the local population would decline. However, it seems that young people are increasingly using dating apps, making matchmaking events less necessary. Reports suggest that remote work and lower-cost housing are drawing more young people back to rural areas, including my hometown. I'm pleased to see my hometown thriving. I also think about returning someday for a peaceful retirement, possibly with Robert, whom I've recently started dating with the possibility of remarriage in mind.
After my divorce from Albert was finalized, I started a new chapter in my life by moving in with my daughter Diana. About 8 months into this new life, something unexpected happened. On one of my days off, I was relaxing at home with Diana when I got a surprising phone call from my mother. She told me that Albert and his mother had suddenly shown up at my parents' house without being invited. Feeling worried and curious, I quickly got dressed and rushed over to my parents' house. When I arrived, I was surprised to find Albert and his mother sitting on the living room sofa, apparently waiting for me. Confused about why they were there, I asked, "Why are you here at my parents' house?" Albert's response shocked me. He demanded that I return the money I supposedly owed him. Let me introduce myself. I'm Judy, a 38-year-old office worker. I was married to Albert for 10 years, and we have a daughter, Diana, who is now in the 8th grade. We met on a blind date and connected instantly because of his warm, friendly, and cheerful nature. Our relationship grew from high school sweethearts to life partners, and he proposed after we had dated for a year. Our wedding was a joyful event, attended by my close group of high school friends. We were all deeply involved in each other's lives, celebrating major milestones together. Over time, each friend in our close-knit circle found their partner and got married, creating a tightly bound community of married couples. We were a happy family, and I always believed our home would be a place of love and support. As we grew older, our group of friends transitioned from carefree singles to married adults. Shortly after I announced my pregnancy, it seemed my friends did too. Soon we became a circle of mothers, sharing the joys and challenges of parenting together. It felt like we were all navigating life side by side, and I believed our bond would last forever. I loved being both a wife and a mother, and I was also passionate about my career. After graduating from college, I got a job in the planning and development department of a large company. My days were busy, and the work was demanding but fulfilling. Each day brought new lessons and challenges. One of my friends, who was a stay-at-home mom, once teased me, saying, "You're a workaholic, Judy, but you also manage to keep a wonderful family life. It's almost like you're living 2 lives." She admired my strength, though I often joked that I wished I had the endless energy of a strong man. Both Albert and Diana played important roles in helping me relax after long days at work. When I got home, Diana would greet me with a bright, "Oh, Mommy, welcome home." Her youthful enthusiasm and warm hugs melted away the day's stress. After Diana was born, Albert switched to part-time work at a local cafe, allowing him to take care of her, pick her up from school, and prepare dinner. This arrangement not only supported my career but also ensured that I came home to a freshly cooked meal, which was a huge relief. Albert's thoughtful cooking helped me unwind and feel refreshed. Evenings at home were a cherished time. Diana and I would often take baths together, chatting about our days and sharing little stories. This simple, everyday interaction brought me immense joy and fulfillment. My life was a beautiful balance of professional success and home life happiness, all made possible by the unwavering support and kindness of Albert and Diana. Their support not only boosted my energy but also deepened my dedication and passion for my work. Together we had created a life that was both rewarding and busy, proving that with the right support, you can have it all. As my career progressed, I began to achieve significant success. I was rewarded with a promotion which brought more responsibilities. This meant working overtime and often coming home late. By this time, Diana had grown older and understood the demands of my job better, so she was able to manage more on her own. Meanwhile, Albert also increased his hours at the cafe, becoming more involved in the world of coffee. Recently, I started exploring different coffee shops, enjoying their unique beans. Today, I even brought home some coffee beans and cakes from a new bakery I found. I suggested we enjoy them together with some coffee, excited to share this with Albert, who had become passionate about roasting and experimenting with different types of beans at his job. This made the coffee he brewed at home exceptionally good. Albert and Diana were both very supportive of my dedication to my career, but despite their understanding, I began to notice a growing distance within our family. The first sign that something was wrong came when Diana approached me with a concern. "What's up? You wanted to talk about something?" I asked her. "The other day, when I went to see a movie with friends, I saw Dad with another woman," she said, her voice uncertain. I was shocked by her words. Diana continued, They weren't holding hands or anything, but they seemed quite close. Lately, I've noticed Dad talking a lot on the phone before you get home. Sometimes he's so engrossed that he doesn't listen to me. He looks happy while he's on the phone. At first, I thought he was texting or talking to you. But after seeing him with that woman, I'm starting to wonder if he was talking to her instead. Diana's expression was filled with sadness. Being in middle school, she was very aware and sensitive to such things, and it was clear she was troubled by what she saw. I was equally stunned. The thought that Albert, who I always believed put Diana first, might be involved with someone else was heartbreaking. This revelation required a careful and sensitive approach, as our family's unity was at stake. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't realize we were making you feel this way. I've been too focused on work, haven't I?" I said, feeling guilty as I looked at Diana. "No, it's okay that you work hard, Mom. Don't feel bad about that," Diana reassured me, her maturity in that moment beyond her years. I was touched by her understanding and compassion. "Thank you, Diana," I replied, my heart heavy. "I'll talk to your dad about this. If it turns out he's having an affair, I think I'll have to consider a divorce. Is that okay with you?" She nodded solemnly. "I don't like the idea of Dad having an affair. Just knowing that and still being with him would make me feel bad." Seeing Diana so distressed made me realize just how much I had overlooked our family's needs. Determined to address this issue, especially since Diana had bravely brought it up, I decided to hire a private investigator to look into Albert's activities. The findings were as shocking as they were conclusive. Albert was indeed having an affair, just as Diana suspected, and there was photographic evidence to prove it. What stunned me most was the identity of his affair partner, Tiffany, one of my high school classmates and a fellow member of our mom's group. I was more hurt by the betrayal of my trusted friend, Tiffany, than by Albert's infidelity. Tiffany, a stay-at-home mom and supposedly a loyal friend, was involved with Albert, neglecting her family commitments. When I saw the evidence, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Alone in my room, I was grateful that Diana hadn't walked in on me during this moment. The photos would have only added to her distress. I wasn't ready to confront Albert yet, and I couldn't let Diana see these disturbing images. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself. Shortly after, another friend from our mom's group mentioned she had changed jobs, which gave me an idea. I suggested we all get together, seeing it as the perfect chance to observe Tiffany without revealing that I knew about the affair. The gathering was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I quietly contacted a lawyer and began preparing for a potential divorce, readying myself for the challenges ahead. I gently informed Diana about what I had discovered and told her that her dad and I would likely be getting a divorce. Together, we spent our free time looking for a new apartment, trying to find a place that would represent a fresh start for us both. As the day of the gathering approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. When the day finally arrived, I engaged in casual conversation with my friends, starting by asking about one friend's new job. We all shared updates on our lives, and Tiffany seemed unaware that I knew her secret. During the conversation, she complained about her routine life, saying, "I'm just a housewife stuck in the same routine, unlike all of you who have careers." "You don't have to work because your husband supports you," another friend pointed out. "I do appreciate my husband," Tiffany replied, "but sometimes I feel a little bored." At that moment, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "So is that why you're having an affair with other people's husbands?" I asked, turning directly to Tiffany. The room fell silent, and the casual atmosphere quickly shifted to tension. "Judy, what do you mean by that?" Tiffany stammered, her face turning pale. "It seems that Tiffany is having an affair with my husband, Albert," I said plainly. "What? No way, you must be joking," another friend interjected, trying to defend Tiffany. Tiffany tried to deflect. "That's right, Judy. What are you talking about all of a sudden? You must have confused me with someone else." "Oh really?" I countered, my voice steady. "Then why don't you all take a look at this?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the photos, and spread them out on the table for everyone to see. The room erupted into gasps of disbelief. "Oh my gosh!" they exclaimed, turning to Tiffany for explanations. Tiffany, clearly caught off guard and unable to deny the evidence in front of her, covered her mouth with her hand. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I happened to walk into the cafe where your husband works. I didn't know he worked there at first, but then I started going there regularly. My husband provides for me, but he's been neglecting me since we got married. I was feeling lonely," Tiffany continued, tears forming in her eyes. Despite her emotional response and attempts to explain her actions, the betrayal cut deep. An affair, especially with a friend's husband, was a breach of trust that was hard to forgive. Her reasons might explain her actions, but they didn't excuse them. The revelation was painful but necessary, confirming the reality I had begun to suspect and reshaping the dynamics of our friendships and personal lives. Throughout the confrontation, I maintained my composure, unaffected by Tiffany's tears. I'm sorry to everyone else here, but Tiffany, I need to let you know that I will be seeking alimony from you, I announced firmly. I also took a formal step earlier today. I sent a certified letter to your mailbox. Your husband should have already seen it. Tiffany's face fell as she absorbed the seriousness of the situation. Oh no, she murmured, a mix of worry and disbelief in her voice. How could he do something so terrible? She asked, still reeling from the shock. It's far worse to have an affair with a friend's husband, especially when you're married and have a child, I replied, steady and resolute. You need to face the consequences and make amends for your actions. Visibly shaken, Tiffany nodded in acknowledgement. One of my friends chimed in, we really can't trust you anymore, Tiffany. With that, we left the restaurant, leaving Tiffany to deal with the fallout. Once I had dealt with Tiffany, it was time to confront Albert. I was certain Tiffany had already informed Albert about what had happened. When I arrived home, Albert was waiting at the door, panicked. What have you done? I just got a call from Tiffany. Are you making our affair public? How could you be so terrible? He demanded. You acted like a good husband, but you were cheating on me. And it's not just about Tiffany. How could you do that to her family? I retorted. It's ridiculous. It seems people who have affairs think that as long as the other person doesn't find out, it's not a big deal. But what you did was wrong, and it all needs to be revealed as part of your punishment. That's why I'm going to divorce you and seek alimony and child support. Faced with clear evidence of the affair, Albert couldn't deny the truth. He agreed to the divorce, though he was hesitant about the financial implications. However, after I hired a strong lawyer and made it clear I was ready to take the case to court, he finally consented to the financial arrangements. Following the divorce, Albert sold the house we had lived in and moved to a new apartment. I pursued and received alimony from both Albert and Tiffany, totaling $50,000 from each, and I also secured child support from Albert. Once everything was settled, Diana and I began our new life together. Though the ordeal was traumatic, it marked the start of a new chapter where we could seek peace and rebuild our lives. Over time, the emotional wounds from my divorce began to heal. However, about 8 months later, I faced a new challenge. One day, while enjoying a relaxed day at home with Diana, my peace was disrupted by an urgent call from my mother. She informed me that my ex-husband Albert and his mother had unexpectedly shown up at my parents' house and forced their way inside without permission. My father wasn't home at the time, so my concerned mother quickly called me. I hurriedly prepared myself and went over to my parents' house. Upon arriving, I found Albert and his mother sitting nonchalantly on the living room sofa as if they belonged there. Confused and alarmed, I asked, "What are you both doing here at my parents' house all of a sudden?" Albert's response was shocking. He demanded, "I want you to give me back the money you owe me." "Huh? I never borrowed any money from you," I replied, perplexed. He retorted, "I paid $25,000 for our wedding, remember? You were in charge of the wedding, so that money was lent to you. Now that we're divorced, you're claiming it was all a fraud. Honestly, I could sue you for marriage fraud, but for now, all I want is that $25,000 back as a settlement." This unreasonable request took me aback. His mother also chimed in, insisting that I pay him as soon as possible. It became clear that Albert was struggling financially, which might have been driving his irrational demands. He had taken a full-time job at the cafe where he used to work part-time, but the pay was modest. Firmly, I reminded him, we were both equally involved in the wedding, and I paid more of our living expenses than you did. The $25,000 is just a small part of what I contributed. Don't bother me with such unreasonable demands. As the tension escalated, they refused to leave. Just then, my father arrived, having been alerted by my mother. "What are you guys doing here?" he demanded sternly. Albert repeated his claims to my father, who, although usually calm, was visibly furious and shocked by Albert's audacious demands. "It's your fault for having an affair in the first place. If you're going to make such outrageous demands, get out of here," my father asserted, trying to expel them from the house. In a desperate turn, Albert fell to his knees and begged, "Please, Judy, lend me money. Not only are you demanding alimony, but Tiffany's husband is also after me, and I can't afford it. Even $6,000 would help." It was disheartening to see him in such a state, begging for money. However, I responded firmly, "No, I can't do that. Go home." The situation highlighted the deep desperation Albert was experiencing, but it also reaffirmed my resolve to maintain boundaries and protect my family's peace. As the situation with my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law escalated, my father intervened, suggesting he'd handle it. "Fine, I'll get the money. Just wait here," he said calmly and walked to another room. Curious, I followed him. With a mischievous grin, he said, "Well, I have plenty of money. Since we have it, why not give it to them?" He opened the closet and pulled out some cash, creating a sense of suspense. "I wonder how this will play out," I mused silently. My father then put the bills into an envelope and handed it to Albert. With faces lit up with satisfaction, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law left with the envelope, thinking their plan had worked. As soon as they stepped out, I locked the door behind them and made a quick call to the police. It didn't take long for Albert and his mother to realize the money was fake. They rushed back, pounding on our door in anger. "Hey, what's going on? This is Monopoly money. I don't want this fake cash," Albert shouted, his voice thick with fury. I couldn't help but laugh as I responded through the door. "Since we have so much of it, I thought I'd share it with you." Albert's frustration peaked, and he began banging even harder, now kicking the door with his feet. Their actions only escalated the situation further. As Albert and his mother wreaked havoc on our door, the police arrived and caught them in the act. The scene drew the attention of the neighbors, many of whom witnessed their arrest. In the end, not only did Albert not get any money, but he was also fined for the disturbance and had to cover the damage to our front door. Ironically, one of the bystanders was a regular at the cafe where Albert worked, and word of his antics spread quickly. As a result, Albert lost his job and struggled to find new work. He had to move back in with his parents, and his in-laws ended up covering his alimony and child support payments. To safeguard my family further, I filed a restraining order against my former in-laws, ensuring that any future incidents would lead to an immediate police response. Now life is more peaceful and fulfilling. I'm devoted to working hard and relishing the time watching my daughter, Diana, grow up. My name is Emily, a 33-year-old woman with a passion for neatness and organization. I work as an auditor at a large firm, and my friends often tease me about my obsession with keeping receipts and paying taxes on time. But I believe these little habits are what keep my life running smoothly. Let me tell you how I met my husband, Jake. It was at a party hosted by our mutual friend, Lisa. I remember that evening clearly. I was sipping a glass of wine and catching up with some old college friends when Jake walked in. He was a bit older, carrying himself with a confident stride and a charming smile. He worked as a manager at a food sales company. "Hey, I'm Jake. Do you mind if I join you?" he asked, holding a beer and looking directly at me. "Sure, I'm Emily. Nice to meet you," I replied, smiling back at him. We started talking, and I was surprised by how effortlessly the conversation flowed. We discovered a mutual love for hiking and a shared passion for classic rock music. A few months into our relationship, Jake invited me to his sister Sarah's barbecue. It was my first time meeting his family, and I was a bit nervous. When we arrived, Sarah greeted us warmly, but her 3 kids were a whirlwind of energy, running around and tossing toys everywhere. "Hey Sarah, this is Emily," Jake said, introducing me. "Nice to meet you, Emily. These are my little rascals, Mike, Tom, and Lily," Sarah said, barely holding on to Tom as he wriggled out of her grasp. "Nice to meet you all," I replied, trying to hide my unease. As the evening went on, the kids became wilder, climbing on furniture, throwing food, and yelling at the top of their lungs. I glanced at Jake, hoping he'd say something, but he just smiled and shrugged. "Aren't they just full of energy?" he said, chuckling. I forced a smile. "Yeah, they sure are." As our relationship progressed, Jake and I started discussing the future. He proposed to me during a hike on a beautiful hill overlooking the valley. It was simple and sweet, just the way I liked it. Our wedding was lovely, aside from one little hiccup: Sarah's kids. They were at it again, running around, making a mess, and being loud. Sarah didn't seem to care, and Jake found it amusing. "Look at them. They're having so much fun," Jake said, laughing as he watched them spill drinks and toss food around. "Yeah, but they're also making a huge mess," I replied, trying to keep my irritation in check. "Oh, come on, Em, they're just kids. Let them enjoy," he said, shrugging it off. I didn't want to spoil our special day by arguing, so I let it go, hoping things would improve once we settled into our new life together. After we got married, Jake and I decided to buy a house together. We had been living in a rented apartment, but we wanted a place to call our own. I was really excited about this new chapter in our lives. One evening after work, Jake and I sat down to discuss our finances and how we'd manage the expenses for our new home. "Emily, we need to figure out how we're going to split the costs," Jake said, leaning back on the couch. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," I replied. "I can handle the furniture, appliances, and some art pieces. What about you?" "Well, I was thinking I could buy you a new car. I know your old one is giving you trouble," Jake suggested. I was surprised and delighted. "Really? That would be amazing. My car is practically falling apart." "Yeah, I've seen it struggle. It's time you had something reliable," he said with a smile. We started house hunting right away. After a few weeks of searching, we found a beautiful house that we both loved. It was a bit pricey, but we decided it was worth it. Moving in was hectic, but I was excited about decorating our new home. I spent a lot of time selecting furniture and appliances, ensuring everything was high quality and stylish. One Saturday, Jake surprised me with a new car. It was a sleek, shiny sedan, and I was thrilled. "Jake, this is incredible. Thank you so much," I exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "You're welcome, Emily. You deserve it," he said, looking proud of himself. As we settled into our new home, everything seemed to be going well. We both enjoyed our jobs and loved coming back to our cozy house. But as time passed, little things started to bother me. Jake's laid-back attitude, which I once found charming, began to get on my nerves, especially when it came to household chores. "Jake, can you help me with the dishes tonight?" I asked one evening after dinner. I had a long day at work. Can't we just leave them for tomorrow?" he replied, giving me pleading eyes. "Jake, we can't keep putting things off. I'm tired too, but we need to keep this place clean," I insisted. "Fine, I'll do it," he said, sighing heavily as he got up from the couch. A few months into our marriage, I started worrying because I couldn't get pregnant. It was really stressing me out. I went to the doctor, and he told me to be patient, that it would happen when the time was right. Still, it was hard not to worry. Meanwhile, Jake's sister Sarah, with her 3 kids, was visiting a lot. Sarah lived in a neighboring state, but you'd think she lived next door with how often she was around. Every time she came over, she'd unload all her problems with her husband on me. It was nonstop. During dinner, while we were trying to relax, she'd be at it, talking about her issues. "Emily, you won't believe what John did this time," Sarah would start, rolling her eyes. "Sarah, can we talk about something else for once?" I'd ask, trying to steer the conversation away from her marital drama. "Oh, come on, Emily, I need to vent. You're the only one who understands," she'd reply, not getting the hint at all. And her kids? They were a nightmare. As soon as they stepped into our house, it was like a circus. They'd run around, fight with each other, throw food, and just be loud. After a long week at work, all I wanted was some peace and quiet, but that was impossible with those kids around. "Guys, can you calm down, please?" I'd say, trying to keep my cool as they tore through the living room. "Why are you always so uptight, Emily?" Sarah would snap at me whenever I tried to get her kids to behave. "They're making a mess, Sarah. I just cleaned the house," I'd respond, feeling my patience wearing thin. "Well, maybe if you had your own kids, you'd understand," she shot back one day, her words hitting me like a punch in the gut. I was stunned by how insensitive she was, especially knowing how much I was struggling with getting pregnant. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't believe Jake didn't say anything to defend me. "Jake, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Emily, calm down. You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, siding with her again. "A big deal out of nothing? She just insulted me in my own home," I shouted, feeling the tears well up. I was so done. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly disrespected in my own home, with my husband always taking his sister's side. It was clear to me that something had to change, and soon. One Saturday, Sarah showed up with her 3 kids. She dumped them on me and said, "Emily, I need a break from parenting. I'm going shopping." I couldn't help but chuckle when she said, "Parenting." The woman barely knew what that meant. "Every time she's here, it's like a zoo." "Fine, Sarah, but you better be quick," I said, already feeling the stress coming on. "Thanks, Emily, you were a lifesaver," she chirped, grabbing her purse and bolting out the door before I could say anything else. Great, I thought, just what I needed. I was in the kitchen, trying to cook dinner. It's a long process and I like things done right, but with those kids running wild, it was impossible to focus. They were yelling, running around, and making a mess. "Guys, can you keep it down?" I shouted from the kitchen, hoping they'd listen for once. Of course they didn't. Suddenly I heard a loud crash. My heart sank. I ran into the living room, and there it was, my grandfather's antique Chinese vase, shattered on the floor. My chest tightened with anger and frustration. "What the hell happened here?" I screamed, looking at the kids who were now standing still with guilty expressions. "We were just playing," one of them mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "This vase is priceless. It's from my grandfather. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I was livid, shaking with anger. Just then, Jake walked in, looking calm and clueless. "What's going on?" "Emily, your nephews just broke my grandfather's vase. Look at this mess." I pointed at the shattered pieces on the floor. "Calm down, Emily. It's just a vase. We can get it fixed," he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Just a vase? This isn't about the vase, Jake. It's about respect. I'm tired of this. Every time Sarah comes over, our house turns into a disaster zone, and you don't care," I shouted, my voice cracking with frustration. Just then, Sarah walked in, bags in hand, looking annoyed. "What's all this yelling about?" "Your kids broke my grandfather's vase, Sarah. Look at this mess." I pointed at the floor, trying to hold back my tears. "Well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them, Emily," she said, not even bothering to apologize. Are you kidding me? They're your kids, Sarah. I shouldn't have to watch them. I was furious, my hands shaking with anger. Jake just shook his head, looking annoyed. You're overreacting, Emily. Just drop it. Overreacting? I've had enough of this. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter in my own home, I screamed, the tears finally spilling over. Jake just stood there, silent and cold, while Sarah smirked like she had won some sort of victory. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the room, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. We'd been dealing with Sarah and her kids' chaotic visits for months, but I had no idea what was coming next. One morning, Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, munching on his toast when he casually dropped a bombshell on me. Emily, I need to tell you something. Sarah's getting divorced, and she's moving in with us with the kids for a few months. He said like he was just telling me the weather. I almost dropped my coffee. What? Are you serious? Our house is already a madhouse when they visit for a day. How are we supposed to handle them living here for months? She's my sister, Emily. She needs our help. You need to be more understanding, he said, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Understanding? I've been more than understanding, Jake, but this is too much. Why can't we rent a place for her nearby? I'll even pay for the first month's rent, I suggested, trying to keep my cool. No, she'll be better off here. Plus, you can help with the kids and keep things clean, he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I'm not a babysitter, Jake. I work too and I need to relax when I get home, I said, my frustration boiling over. Stop being so selfish, Emily. It's family. They need us, he said, his tone getting sharper. I'm not being selfish, Jake. I'm just asking for a reasonable solution. I'm not going to let my life be turned upside down, I said, feeling my anger bubbling up. Well, they're coming tomorrow evening, so you better get used to the idea, he said, standing up and heading out of the kitchen. I couldn't believe it. I felt completely blindsided and betrayed. The next morning, I woke up early, still fuming from our argument. I got dressed for work and went to grab my car keys, but they were nowhere to be found. When I called Jake, he picked up the phone, sounding way too calm for my liking. I took the car. It's mine, remember? I'm giving it to Sarah so she can use it for the kids. I was stunned into silence for a moment. You're giving my car to Sarah? Are you serious right now? It's not your car, Emily. I paid for it, and she needs it more than you do, he said, his tone matter of fact. That's the last straw, Jake. You've taken everything from me, and I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with anger. What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic, Emily, he said, clearly not getting it. I stood there in the hallway, holding my phone, unable to believe what was happening. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had things gotten so bad? I picked up the phone and called a moving company. Hi, I need a team to move some furniture and appliances today. It's urgent. The movers arrived a couple of hours later. I showed them around the house, pointing out the items to be moved. Take everything. The beds, sofas, chandeliers, even the faucets in the bathroom. The movers got to work, and soon the house started to look empty. I felt a strange sense of relief watching them carry out each piece of furniture. As the last item was loaded onto the truck, I directed them to my mom's house. Everything goes there. Thanks for the quick work, guys, I said, handing them a tip. With the house now bare, I grabbed my essentials and headed to my mom's place. A few hours later, my phone started buzzing. It was Jake calling repeatedly. I ignored the calls, feeling a mixture of anxiety and empowerment. That evening, there was a loud knock on my mom's door. I opened it to find Jake standing there, looking furious. What the hell, Emily? What did you do? He shouted as he stormed into the living room. I took my stuff, Jake. You took the car, so I took what I bought, I said, keeping my voice calm. This is insane. You stripped the house bare. Where are Sarah and the kids supposed to sleep? He yelled, his face red with anger. That's your problem, Jake. You made this mess, now you deal with it, I replied, crossing my arms. You're a thief, Emily. You stole everything. He shouted, waving his arms around. I didn't steal anything. Here are the receipts, I said, pulling out a folder and showing him the proof of purchase for all the furniture and appliances. He looked through the receipts, his anger shifting to frustration. Fine, Emily, if this is how you want to play it. I'll file for divorce, Jake said. I took a deep breath and handed him a stack of papers. Already done. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them, and we're done. He stared at the papers, his face pale. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious, Jake. I deserve better than this, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. He took a pen from his pocket, signed the papers without another word, and handed them back to me. Fine, Emily, have it your way. I watched as he turned and walked out of my mom's house, the door slamming behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. It was over, and I knew it was the right decision. That night, I sat down with my mom and talked about everything that had happened. She was supportive and agreed that I had made the right choice. "Emily, you've been through a lot. It's time you focused on yourself and your happiness," she said, giving me a comforting hug. "Thanks, Mom. I just need some time to figure things out," I replied, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. Over the next few days, I started to settle into a new routine. I began organizing my new space at my mom's house and planning my next steps. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had reclaimed my life, and there was no turning back. After divorcing Jake, we sold our house and split the money. I decided it was time to really set up my new place. My mom's house was great for a bit, but I needed my own space. One afternoon, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mom, scrolling through listings on my laptop. "Mom, I think I found a place that looks perfect. It's a small apartment downtown, close to work," I said, showing her the pictures. She looked over my shoulder and smiled. "That looks nice, Emily. Have you called the realtor yet?" "Not yet, but I'm going to do that right now," I said, feeling a bit excited. I dialed the number and waited for the realtor to pick up. After a few rings, a friendly voice answered. "Hello, this is Mark. How can I help you?" "Hi Mark, my name is Emily. I'm interested in the apartment you have listed downtown. Is it still available?" I asked, crossing my fingers. "Yes, it's still available. Would you like to schedule a viewing?" he replied, sounding hopeful. "Absolutely. How about tomorrow afternoon?" I suggested, trying to sound calm. "That works for me. I'll see you at 3:00 p.m., Mark said before we ended the call. The next day I headed downtown to meet Mark and check out the apartment. When I arrived, he was waiting outside the building, a friendly smile on his face. "Hi Emily, nice to meet you. Let me show you around," he said, shaking my hand. The apartment was small but cozy, just what I needed. It had a nice kitchen, a spacious living room, and a small balcony with a decent view of the city. "This place is perfect, Mark. I'll take it," I said, feeling a sense of relief. After signing the mortgage agreement and getting the keys, I started planning my move. I wanted to make this new space my own, a fresh start. I spent the next few days packing up my things at my mom's house and arranging for movers to help me with the big stuff. On moving day, my mom and a couple of close friends came over to help. As we loaded the last box into the moving truck, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about this new chapter in my life. "Emily, this is going to be great for you. A fresh start is just what you need," my mom said, giving me a reassuring hug. "Thanks, Mom. I'm really looking forward to it," I replied, smiling. We drove to my new apartment, and with everyone's help, we had everything unloaded and set up in no time. As I looked around my new place, I felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and I was ready for it. That evening, I invited my mom and friends to stay for dinner to celebrate the move. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes and laughter. "Cheers to Emily and her new place," my friend Lisa said, raising her glass of soda. "Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your help and support," I said, feeling grateful. As the night went on, we talked and laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy and free. After the party, as I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights, I thought about everything I had been through and how far I had come. I was proud of myself for taking control of my life and making the changes I needed. I heard from some mutual friends that Jake used his share of the money to buy a small apartment. Now he's living there with Sarah and her 3 kids. Jake's working 2 jobs to keep up with the bills, while Sarah still isn't working. They're fighting all the time. One day, out of the blue, Jake called me. I was surprised to see his name pop up on my phone, but I decided to answer, curious about what he had to say. "Hello, Jake. What's up?" I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Emily, please just hear me out," he started, sounding desperate. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize how hard it was for you with Sarah's kids." I couldn't help but laugh a little. "Really, Jake? You're realizing this now, after all this time?" "Yeah, I know it's late, but I'm serious. I've been thinking a lot, and I miss you. I miss us. Can we start over? I'm ready to move into your apartment and make things right," he said, his voice almost pleading. I chuckled, shaking my head in disbelief. "Jake, you've got to be kidding me. You think you can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened?" "Emily, I'm serious. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll even take on more work to make it up to you," he said, sounding more desperate. "Jake, I've moved on. I'm happy now. I'm not looking to go back to that mess," I replied firmly. "Come on, Emily. We can make it work this time. I've changed," he insisted. I sighed, feeling a mix of pity and irritation. "Jake, it's over. You need to focus on your life and your family. I'm not interested in going back to that chaos. Emily, please, I'm begging you, he said, his voice breaking. Jake, no. I found peace without you. I'm not giving that up, I said, standing my ground. Take care, Jake. I hope you find your way. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and closure. It was clear that Jake was struggling, but I couldn't let his problems drag me back into a situation I had worked so hard to escape. Later that day, I met up with Lisa for coffee and told her about the call. You won't believe who called me today, I said, rolling my eyes. Who? Lisa asked, raising an eyebrow. Jake. He actually begged me to take him back and let him move into my apartment, I said, shaking my head. Lisa laughed, almost spitting out her coffee. Are you serious? What did you say? I told him no, of course. I'm not going back to that mess, I replied, smiling. We spent the rest of the afternoon chatting and laughing, and I realized how far I had come. I had built a new life for myself, one that was peaceful and fulfilling. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As I walked home, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. I had finally closed the chapter on that part of my life, and I was ready to move forward with confidence and joy. Hi, my name is Alexis, and I'm 29 years old. I split my work between home and the office. My husband, Bruce, who's also 29, really loves his mom, Doris, but Doris often treats me badly. Even with these challenges, Bruce and I recently celebrated our second wedding anniversary, and I'm proud of how we've managed our relationship. Work has become a safe place for me, giving me a break and leading to several promotions, which isn't common for women in my field. Right now, I'm on a business trip in Europe, attending important meetings. During one meeting, my phone, which was on silent, started vibrating a lot. It was unusual, so I thought it might be an emergency, especially after seeing 5 missed calls from Doris. Worried, I stepped out to call her back. Just as I was about to, she called again. Hello, Alexis, where are you? She asked, sounding annoyed. I didn't like her tone, but I answered anyway. Hi, Doris. How are you? Is everything okay? Where are you? She repeated, clearly impatient. Even though she was being irritating, I was in the middle of something important and didn't want to argue. I'm sorry, Doris, didn't Bruce tell you? I'm in a meeting on a business trip. Can we talk later? I said gently. Bruce mentioned it, but what are you doing leaving your house and husband alone? Come back home immediately, she demanded. As usual, her demands were sudden and unreasonable. I'm sorry, Doris, but I'm busy with something crucial and can't leave, I started to explain, but she cut me off. You're so controlling, even though you're just Bruce's wife. I don't care about your excuses. Come home right now. Her words were harsh, but I had to stay calm for the sake of my job. Today was turning out to be more important than I expected. Do you realize what today is? I asked, confused. Doris, with a slight smirk, revealed, We're celebrating my 62nd birthday today. Her tone was a mix of triumph and expectation. This surprised me because I thought her birthday was later in the month. It was even more surprising since I was on a business trip. My husband and I had planned a special dinner at a fancy restaurant to celebrate her milestone birthday later on. I was getting tired of Doris's constant attempts to control things, which seemed to get worse every year, especially when she knew I was busy with important work. As I mentioned, I'm currently away on business, so I won't be able to make it back home, I explained calmly. That's amusing, she replied sarcastically. I spoke to Bruce earlier, and he's taken the day off for me. All the relatives will be there, but you, Alexis, are always buried in work. You seem so detached. How do you think that makes your husband's family feel? Her words were meant to hurt, and I knew if I kept talking, her sarcasm would only get worse. Since I was still in an important meeting, I had no choice but to end the conversation. I'm sorry, but I can't attend your 62nd birthday celebration, I said. Doris's tone suddenly changed. She took a deep breath, clearly frustrated. Fine then, I won't consider you part of the family anymore. Don't bother coming back. It's like a divorce. Bruce deserves better, she declared, her words sharp and painful. Her harsh remarks left me both angry and upset, but I refused to argue over the phone. All right, we'll discuss this when I get back. I'm sorry, but I need to go now, I replied. Doris snapped back. What's with that attitude? I told you not to come back. I'll just talk to Bruce myself, and then she hung up. Drained from the interaction with my mother-in-law, I returned to my meeting, taking a deep breath after 3 more days of back-to-back meetings. I finally headed home, feeling angry and frustrated the entire way because of the fight with Doris. I barely remember the drive. When I opened the front door and called out, I heard my husband, Bruce, say, "Welcome back," in a tired voice. I took off my heels and walked into the living room, leaving my luggage by the entrance. There, surrounded by cardboard boxes, was Bruce, sweating as he sealed them with tape. What's with all the boxes? I asked, curious. Bruce explained that the boxes were packed with my things. He told me that during Doris's 62nd birthday celebration, the day she called me, she announced to everyone that I had ignored her birthday and been rude on the phone. She even told the relatives that she wanted me divorced and sent back to my parents' house because I wasn't a good match for her son. This was typical of my mother-in-law, so I asked Bruce for more details. And then what happened? Did your mother tell you to get a divorce and you just agreed to it? No, I didn't exactly agree, Bruce replied, sounding exhausted. But she insisted that I pack up your stuff. I felt cornered. What was I supposed to do? He stopped packing and looked defeated. What do you mean you didn't argue with your mother? Does this mean you're okay with the idea of us getting a divorce? I asked, feeling confused and frustrated. Bruce then shared that his father, Russell, had also sided with Doris, telling him, if Doris is upset, it'll be hard on you. Best to just do what she says. So Bruce had reluctantly gone along with the idea of a divorce. I was shocked at how easily Bruce seemed to accept his mother's decision. What is wrong with your family? I wondered aloud. Your father is controlled by your mother, and you just blindly follow her too. It felt like no one was on my side. Finally, Bruce said, what my mother decides is final. It's only until she calms down and things settle. This divorce isn't real. I'll come for you when things are better, he added, looking at me with pleading eyes. I wished he would direct that pleading toward his mother instead. How could a grown man like Bruce be so afraid of his mother? I thought, feeling a mix of disappointment and disbelief. It seemed like there was no saving this situation. I almost felt ashamed, wondering what I had ever seen in him. As I thought about everything, I realized that maybe this was an unexpected chance for freedom. Staying with Bruce meant constantly dealing with Doris's hostility and her endless talk about divorce. Maybe separating was actually a blessing in disguise. I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself, and living alone wouldn't be a problem. With this new clarity, I faced Bruce and said firmly, let's go ahead with the divorce. Afterward, I called Doris. It took several tries, but she finally answered. Hello, Doris said. I responded softly, as you wish, we're getting a divorce. Doris's voice was unnaturally cheerful as she replied, yes, please leave. Finally, you realize you're not good enough for Bruce. I'm so relieved. Don't worry, I'll find him a new wife who is obedient, pretty, and nice to her in-laws. Her words were full of a misplaced sense of victory as she added, I'm sure Bruce will be just fine. I'll take care of him until he finds his next wife, so you don't need to worry about that, Doris said, dripping with sarcasm. After hearing enough of her attitude, I told her, well, don't misunderstand. It's not just about you. Still feeling good about herself, Doris snapped back, oh, you're just a sore loser. Don't worry about me or Bruce, Alexis. I've got the divorce papers from the city office and gave them to Bruce. Don't forget to sign them. Then, without another word, she hung up. Bruce, who had overheard my conversation, looked strangely relieved, which made me wonder if he really understood what was happening. By the way, does your mother know you're actually a full-time house husband? I asked. How could I tell her that? He replied, his tone becoming serious. My mother is obsessed with the idea that I'm a high-ranking employee at a big company, right? I nodded, thinking about his behavior. I realized that Bruce had never been honest with Doris. At home, he wore old sweatshirts, but whenever he had to meet her, he'd put on a suit and pretend to be at work whenever she called. Doris had proudly announced at her birthday party that Bruce was such a devoted son, taking time off just to be there. She also bragged about his supposed status, claiming he could easily find a more obedient and attractive wife than me. This facade, kept up for appearances, was part of the strange dynamics that had brought our relationship to this point. The truth would likely come out once our divorce was finalized, but Doris, who thought so highly of her son, would probably never expect that Bruce was no longer working at the prestigious company he used to be at. In fact, Bruce had left his job about a year ago. What Doris saw as her elite, high-status son was now an unemployed, full-time house husband. Bruce's departure from his job came after a big mistake that led to a demotion, a pay cut, and a formal apology. He likely kept this hidden from his mother, fearing her reaction. The setback had a huge impact on him, especially given Doris's tendency to coddle him. The mere thought of returning to an office environment and facing the consequences of his mistake made him extremely anxious and sick. At first, he tried to manage by reporting his absences and requesting paid leave, but eventually he stopped calling in altogether. As his unauthorized absences piled up, he was fired. Now, without any plans to find a new job, Bruce relied heavily on my income. He hadn't told Doris any of this, knowing she would be furious and disappointed. I felt a bit of regret knowing I wouldn't get to see Doris's reaction when she found out about her son's situation after I left. I imagined she would be utterly shocked, maybe even extremely upset, but that was no longer my concern. When Bruce handed me the divorce papers, he mentioned they were just a way to calm his mother down. Okay, I said, taking in the information. I quickly filed the papers and signed a lease for a new apartment, moving out as soon as I could. A month later, to my surprise, Doris called. Even though I thought I had cut ties for good, curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "What do you want now? Aren't you happy to be rid of me?" I asked, with a hint of sarcasm in my voice. "You're still the same. Just listen to me," Doris replied, her tone unchanged. She started talking about Bruce. She revealed that since I had left, she had visited Bruce's apartment multiple times to help with chores, only to find him lounging around in his room each time, with no signs of going to work or being sick. Suppressing a laugh, I replied casually, "Well, Bruce is like that because he has no intention of working again." Doris, seemingly unaware of her role in the situation, shockingly asked, "Alexis, can you do something about it?" "Why should I? You didn't want me in your family and wanted nothing to do with me," I retorted. It was so typical of her to ask for help only when it suited her, after treating me badly for so long. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I realized just how much of a mess she had made for herself. Doris then questioned me, trying to shift the blame onto me. "I was wondering if you said something to Bruce before you left." It was astonishing how she was trying to make me the bad guy, ignoring the real issues with her son. "Really, Doris?" I replied, incredulous at her insinuation. "You think I married Bruce just for a luxurious life? Why would the divorce hurt if that were true?" She looked at me suspiciously, as if she believed I had married Bruce just for his wealth. "Are you kidding me?" I thought to myself, amazed at how delusional she was. "I was the one supporting Bruce financially throughout our marriage. It was me providing for him," I continued, feeling frustrated. Because of Bruce, I couldn't even afford to live extravagantly. Should I consider asking for alimony? Doris was shocked by my statement. "How dare you make up something like that, Alexis? You just forgot to ask for alimony, didn't you? Bruce has a higher income and position than you. Don't be so unreasonable. If you want money, Bruce can pay whatever you want. After all, he's a high-level employee at a major company," she retorted, sticking to her false belief. Perhaps Bruce hadn't told her the truth. I didn't want to seem like I was gossiping, but I saw an opportunity to set the record straight. "Your proud son is a full-time house husband. He quit his job a long time ago," I revealed. "You're lying," Doris shouted, her voice so loud it hurt my ears. I pulled the phone away and suggested, "Why don't you check with his company? You'll find out who's telling the truth." There was a long silence. Then, with a much softer tone, Doris stammered, "Well, what if that's true? How are we going to manage? I can't support my son on just my pension, and no one will want to marry him if he's unemployed. What are we going to do?" I couldn't help but grin at her sudden change of heart. "What shall we do?" I echoed her words, amused. After a pause, she mumbled something to someone beside her. Then, in a completely altered tone, she pleaded, "Hey, Alexis, will you please come back home?" Her sudden shift puzzled me, but I replied firmly, "No, we're already divorced. I wouldn't come back to your family if heaven and earth turned upside down." The finality in my voice marked the end of that chapter as I moved on from the complicated ties that had bound me. As I was speaking to Doris, a commotion erupted in the background. Someone was shouting. It sounded like Bruce. His voice cut through. "I told you I'd come for you when things settled down." Doris quickly responded, "Yes, you could remarry my son if you wanted." "What are you talking about?" I asked, baffled and firm. "No way, I wouldn't do it for the world. Don't joke about this." "Thanks, but seriously, no." I made it clear to Doris that I had no interest in rekindling anything with her son or getting involved in any more toxic dynamics. I was done with someone who was overly devoted to his mother. "I did what you asked, so please stop changing your mind," Doris retorted, but the tension was obvious even through the phone. "There's a bit of verbal sparring here. It's not like you should take my words so seriously. You've been quite dismissive, haven't you?" she added. "I didn't think you'd go through with divorcing my son," she continued, her tone revealing her surprise at my firm rejection. In response to Doris' excuses, I said, "Well, I was just tolerating the situation. Besides, Bruce packed up my things and essentially kicked me out without my consent." I vented my frustration, listing everything she had done against me. "You see, that was just a prank," she claimed nonchalantly. "A prank? It's worse than that," I said, completely exasperated. There was nothing more to be said. Glancing at my watch, I noticed it was nearly 2:00 p.m. My lunch break had been wasted on this fruitless conversation. "Ah, Doris, are you done now?" I asked, eager to end the call. "What, Alexis? What did you say?" she replied, her voice suddenly sweet. Did Doris think that a sweet tone would soften my response? Knowing I wouldn't meet her expectations, I said firmly, "I'm going to hang up now. I have another meeting in a few minutes and need to review some documents." As I began to disconnect the call, Doris persisted, "Wait, Alexis. Hey, Alexis, say something." I could hear her shouting as I hung up, leaving the chaos and the unwanted pleas behind me. I was ready to move forward, free from the turmoil that had entangled me for too long. During the chaos of our phone call, Doris also took the opportunity to berate Bruce, scolding him for mishandling the situation and pointing out the consequences of his actions. It became clear that Doris was quick to blame everyone else for her troubles. Completely drained by her behavior, I ended the call and decided to block her number for good. Afterward, Bruce tried repeatedly to reach me. Seeing a clear path forward, I consulted my lawyer to seek alimony. Faced with the prospect of legal action, Bruce's family, likely anxious about the consequences, agreed to settle the alimony in a lump sum payment. It seemed my former in-laws had to advance the money, which left Russell and Doris consistently agitated with Bruce. They urged him daily to find a job, which only added to his frustrations. Ultimately, Bruce moved back into his parents' house because he could no longer afford his apartment rent. He blamed his parents for his situation, which was now straining their finances, including their pension and retirement savings. Like mother, like son, they continued to blame each other for their problems and refused to reflect on their contributions to the mess. They were even considering applying for welfare, a move I hoped would make them realize that their selfish behavior couldn't continue indefinitely. On a brighter note for me, the business proposal I made during my trip was accepted, leading to a significant contract. This achievement resulted in another promotion, a higher salary, and a more affluent lifestyle. Now enjoying the freedom of a rich bachelor's existence, I was relieved to be free from the tormented in-laws and financial dependence on family members. Reflecting on the past, if I ever consider marriage again, I will undoubtedly conduct a thorough background check to avoid any mama's boys or troublesome in-laws.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniela, and today I'm going to share my own story about my mother-in-law. Luckily, I didn't have to deal with my awful mother-in-law, Lily, for long. My husband Ian kicked her out early in our marriage, and here's why. I met Ian in college since we were studying the same subject. He was very shy and didn't talk to many people, but we bonded over our love for music and started dating quickly. We fell in love fast. Ian was an amazing person, but he had a troubling past. His dad died when he was 12, and his mom quickly remarried. Sadly, his new stepfather was very abusive. I won't go into details because it's sensitive, but it was bad enough for Ian to get a restraining order against him when he turned 18. When Ian told me his story, I wondered why his mom didn't protect him. I asked Ian, "Why didn't your mom do anything when her husband was hurting you?" "Didn't she know?" "She knew everything, Daniela," Ian replied. "But she didn't want to leave him because she loved him. I begged her to help, but she just told me to get over it. She even yelled at me when I got the restraining order." "That's terrible, Ian. She should have protected you." "Why do you still talk to her?" "I barely talk to her," Ian said. "I told her I'd support her if she left her husband, but until then, I keep my distance." I admired Ian even more after hearing his story. He worked hard to support himself through college, since there was no college fund for him. He was a great student and got a good job right after graduation. I also had a good job, so we got engaged early, but it took a long time to get married because of Lily. After Ian got his job, Lily suddenly decided to leave her husband, claiming it was because of Ian. She manipulated him into taking care of her financially. I warned Ian that his mom was playing with his emotions. "Ian, I don't like how your mom is handling this. She's making it seem like it's all your fault." "What can I do, Daniela? It's true that she had to leave him because of me. Now that she's choosing me, it's my duty to look after her." "I understand you want to care for your mom, but she's trying to control you emotionally," I told him. But it was hard to make Ian see that his mom wasn't really choosing him. She just knew he could support her now. There was another problem with Lily. She hated me. She would say things like, "Just because Ian's marrying you doesn't mean you'll have him all to yourself. He's my son first and your husband later." I replied, "It's funny you say that, Lily. I don't remember you ever putting your son first, and I don't mind if he looks after you. We're both his family. Don't try to be clever, Daniela. I can throw you out of Ian's life if I want to. I know you make less money than him, so it's clear you're marrying my son for money," she said. "I'll prove it to him and make him leave you. Then I'll have all his attention and money, and you won't get anything," Lily threatened. I knew she wasn't going to be a good mother-in-law. She wasn't even a good mom. But her twisted thinking really shocked me. It was clear she didn't want Ian to spend money on anyone but her. Ian was already giving her a lot, so I didn't understand why she wanted more. That would become important later. Fast forward a year, and I finally got married. I was so happy to marry the man of my dreams. We were all set to move into the house I had inherited from my parents, but my joy only lasted a week. Just a week after we moved in, Lily showed up with all her stuff. She walked in like she owned the place and started choosing a room. I watched in confusion and asked, "What are you doing, Lily? Why did you bring all your things?" "Are you dumb or something, Daniela? This is my son's house now, so I'll be staying here too," she replied. "What are you talking about? You can't just walk in and demand to live here." "Listen to me, you little," she snapped. "This is my son's place, and I know he pays most of the bills, so I have every right to live here too. I warned you that I could kick you out of my son's life if I wanted to. This is just the beginning, Daniela. If you think you can throw me out, I'd like to see you try." I was stunned by Lily's nerve. I couldn't believe how confident she was. I decided to talk to Ian about it since I wasn't going to entertain Lily's outrageous demands. To my surprise, Ian already knew she was moving in. He begged me to let her stay until he figured out what to do. He didn't want his mom on the street and reminded me of his duty to her. I was really angry, but I gave him time to sort things out. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Just a week after Lily moved in, I saw her invite someone over. From their conversation, I realized this woman was an interior designer. I didn't stop them because I had already had several fights with Lily and knew how nasty she could get. So I decided to deal with the problem if it actually became one. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, not thinking much of it, and was surprised to find out it was the interior designer who had come to my house. She asked to meet me at a cafe because she had something important to tell me. I was alarmed and immediately set up a meeting. I had no idea how much my life was about to change. When I met with Sylvia, she said, "Hi, I'm Sylvia. You've probably seen me around before." "Hello, Sylvia. Yes, I've seen you. I guess my mother-in-law hired you for something. She mentioned you're an interior designer," I replied. "Yes, I am," Sylvia confirmed. "But some of the things your mother-in-law asked for didn't seem right, so I thought you should know." "Oh? What's the issue, Sylvia?" I asked, a bit concerned. "Actually, I didn't even know why Lily called you. This house is mine, and she's just staying here for a while. I was getting a little suspicious when she brought you over." Sylvia looked shocked. "Oh my God, this house is yours. Then you need to know something right away. It's a good thing I came to you. Your mother-in-law is trying to install cameras in your room. She wants to spy on you and your husband." I was shocked and disgusted by what Lily was planning. The idea that she wanted to invade our privacy like that was horrifying. Wow, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, she does this. "Does she know that what she's trying to do is illegal?" I asked. "Yes, she knows. I made sure she understood that, and I tried to convince her not to do it, but she threatened to hire someone else. I was worried about your safety, so I came to tell you," Sylvia explained. "Thank you so much for telling me, Sylvia. I'll always be grateful to you. Who knows what would have happened if you hadn't warned me. This is insane. I can't believe she would do something so horrible and illegal. But before I turned Lily down, I wanted to make sure you knew about this," Sylvia said. "You did me a huge favor, Sylvia," I replied. "And you know what? I'm going to hire you instead. I've realized we do need some cameras in the house, and I'm hoping you can help me set them up. Plus, I'd like to remodel my office as well." Sylvia was excited by the idea, so we made a plan. I had already started to suspect something was off with Lily as soon as she moved in. Yan and I had been away from the house for long periods, and I noticed someone else had been in the house besides Lily. I even found some strange clothes in the dryer that didn't belong to us. That's why I decided to install cameras in the house, especially near Lily's room. I wasn't going to put them in her room because that would be wrong and illegal. Sylvia and I carried out our plan perfectly. She didn't reject Lily's request but promised to bring the best cameras. In the meantime, Sylvia secretly set up cameras in our house while Lily was out shopping. Sylvia is a pro and hid the cameras well. Afterward, I told Ian about the cameras. "Ian, I need to tell you something. I've installed some cameras in the house," I said. "What? Why? Is something going on?" Ian asked, surprised. "Yes, Ian. Do you remember the weird clothes I found in the dryer? There's been other strange stuff happening. I think someone else is staying in our house." "Oh my God, that's insane," Ian exclaimed. "Yes, and all the signs point to your mother. Look, I know you trust her, but you need to wake up. She's not who you think she is," I said. Ian started to defend Lily and got mad at me, but I reminded him of her awful behavior, which quickly shut him up. We talked about a lot of things, but I didn't mention what Lily tried to do with Sylvia. I wanted Ian to realize on his own that something suspicious was happening. Once he agreed with me about the cameras, I could see my plan coming together. I also made sure Ian understood that we couldn't tell Lily about the cameras yet. He agreed and promised not to say anything. The next day, Ian and I went to work as usual. We both had direct access to the cameras in the house, but we were busy all day and didn't have time to check the footage. However, when we got home, we sat down together and watched what had happened throughout the day. You wouldn't believe what we found. Lily was having Ian's abusive stepfather over when we weren't home. This awful man was using our resources and staying with Lily, even though we had a restraining order against him. Ian was horrified by what Lily had done. He was furious and ready to take drastic action. I had never seen Ian so angry before. Before I could ask what to do, he yelled for Lily to come into our room. When she saw us watching the CCTV footage, she turned pale. Ian, what's going on? Why did you call me? Lily asked, clearly nervous. Mom, why did you bring that abuser into our house? Who gave you permission? Ian demanded. What are you talking about, Ian? You must be mistaken. I don't talk to your stepfather anymore. Remember, you made me choose, and I chose you, Lily replied, trying to deflect. Yes, you chose me, and I've supported you financially and even convinced Daniela to let you stay here. And this is how you repay me? Who did you really choose, Mom? Ian pressed. Lily's defense crumbled as Ian played the footage of her bringing his stepfather into the house. She turned pale and started sweating, realizing she was caught. How dare you invade my privacy and record me? You can't do this to me. Lily shouted, trying to regain control. Oh really? Is setting up a camera in my room to spy on me right? I retorted. If you can do that, why can't I put cameras in my own house? What are you talking about, Daniela? Ian asked, shocked. Mom tried to put cameras in our room, I explained. She even hired an interior designer for it, but the designer was honest and told me everything. Ian was furious. He felt the betrayal deeply and confronted Lily. She tried to justify her actions, claiming she was trying to protect Ian from me, but it was clear she was lying. How dare you accuse Daniela like that? Ian exploded. You're the one who betrayed me, used my money, and supported the man who abused me. No more lies, Mom. Get out of my house. I never want to see you again. Lily begged and cried, clinging to Ian's legs, but he was resolute. He packed her bags and threw them outside, telling her to leave. When she refused, Ian threatened to call the cops, and she finally left. That night, I comforted Ian as he dealt with the trauma of his mother's betrayal. The next day, we reported his stepfather to the police for breaking the restraining order and had all the locks in our house changed, thanks to Sylvia's help. Lily kept calling, begging for forgiveness, but we blocked her. She had no money and nowhere to go after her husband was arrested. She tried showing up at our house multiple times, but we always threatened to call the police. Eventually, Lily left town, and we haven't heard from her since. Ian went back to therapy to deal with his trauma, and we also attended couples counseling to improve our communication and work on the issues that Lily had caused in our marriage. Now we're doing much better and living a good life, while Lily is somewhere else, hopefully learning her lesson.
My name's Nora Thompson. Tonight, like most nights since arriving in Monte Carlo, I found myself sitting alone at a small cafe on the edge of Casino Square. It's a far cry from the luxurious life I was born into. After graduating from an elite college in the States, all I wanted was a simple break from the world I knew. My father owns a vast empire from hotels to tech firms, but I use my mother's maiden name to keep things grounded and to avoid the spotlight. The evening had cooled when he walked in. Daniel exuded an air of ownership, or at least the confidence that comes from wearing a suit worth more than most people's rent. He pulled out the chair opposite me without asking. Mind if I sit? He finally said, though he was already seated. His smile was all charm, probably well rehearsed. Looks like you're already sitting, I replied, barely glancing up from my coffee. He chuckled, his laugh too smooth. I'm Daniel, and you are? Nora, I said curtly, giving him a quick once-over. Not my usual type, too polished, but admittedly good-looking. So, Nora, What brings a girl like you to a pricey haunt like this all by yourself? His tone was teasing, and I wasn't sure if I was amused or annoyed. Just enjoying my coffee, I answered vaguely. And you? I asked. What's your excuse? I could say business, but I'd be lying, he said with a smirk. Tonight, let's just say I'm scouting for something interesting, and it looks like I might have found it. I raised an eyebrow. Hope the coffee lives up to your expectations then. Daniel laughed. Something tells me it's already exceeded them. I wasn't here to make friends or find a fling. Look, I'm not one of those girls who falls for lines if that's what you're aiming for. And I'm certainly not interested in whatever game you're playing. Who says I'm playing a game? He asked, his voice lowering slightly. Experience, I replied. You sit down uninvited, start with a line. What, do you expect a phone number or a date? He leaned back, genuinely amused now. You're tough. I like that. Not looking for a number, just conversation. But if it's too much, just say the word, and I'll vanish. I considered him for a moment. Monte Carlo was beautiful but lonely. Maybe a little chat wouldn't hurt. Conversation is fine, but keep it light. We talked for a while. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. He didn't press for personal details, and I didn't offer any. As the night wore on, I realized I was actually enjoying myself. Daniel wasn't like the usual guys who tried to impress me with their wealth or connections. He had an air of someone used to the finer things but not defined by them. Eventually, the evening drew to a close. Well, Daniel, this was unexpectedly pleasant, I said as I stood to leave. Surprised yourself, huh? He asked with a grin. Maybe just a bit. Good night, Daniel. As I walked back to my apartment, his words lingered in my mind. Monte Carlo had indeed turned out to be full of surprises, and perhaps, just perhaps, I had stumbled upon one tonight. After that first encounter with Daniel, the nights in Monte Carlo seemed a bit less solitary. He had a knack for appearing wherever I was, whether I was exploring the local markets or having a late dinner by myself. His persistence wasn't annoying. Surprisingly, it was quite the opposite. Maybe because he wasn't push-shy, he just seemed genuinely interested in being around me. One breezy evening, as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, he walked over with 2 coffees in hand and sat down beside me without a word. Assuming I wanted coffee, I teased, raising an eyebrow. He handed me a cup. If I'm wrong, I'll drink both. Good guess, I said, accepting the coffee. We sat in silence for a bit, the sound of the waves filling the quiet moments. You never told me what you do back in the States. Daniel finally broke the silence. Didn't think it mattered. I shrugged. I work. Right now, I'm just enjoying not working. Fair enough, he chuckled. Everyone's got a story, though, don't you think? Over the next few days, we fell into an easy routine. Daniel showed me parts of Monte Carlo I hadn't explored yet. We talked about everything and nothing. Movies, books, our favorite foods. He loved to argue about the best James Bond actor, staunchly defending Daniel Craig, while I was all about the classics like Sean Connery. One day, as we strolled along the beach, he stopped suddenly and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. Nora, I know I'm just some guy you met at a cafe, but these past weeks have been, I don't know, different. Better because of you. I stopped too, unsure how to respond. Feelings were not what I planned on dealing with here. Daniel, I like hanging out with you. I do. But this is just a break for me. I'm not looking for complications. He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. I get it. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, okay? And I think you're pretty amazing. Days turned into weeks, and my time in Monte Carlo was drawing to a close. Daniel and I spent more and more time together. What started as casual walks and talks turned into late-night dinners and early morning breakfasts. It was the last thing I expected, to fall for someone under the Mediterranean stars. Then one evening, he dropped a bombshell. Come back with me, Nora. Work at my company in the States. I know it's sudden, but I think it could be great. The idea was crazy, completely insane. And yet part of me was tempted by the adventure, by the idea of taking this, whatever it was, and seeing where it could go. Moving back to the States felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Daniel's offer wasn't just a job, it was an invitation into his life. Suddenly, I was living in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary part of town, playing the role of an ordinary girl who'd lucked out. My father, however, had different ideas about ordinary. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, just as I was unpacking my last box. His booming laugh filled my small living room as he stood in the doorway, towering and larger than life. Nora, hiding out in plain sight, huh? He chuckled, giving me a hug that almost crushed my ribs. So, tell me about this decision. This guy must be something special for you to up and move like this. His tone was light, but I could tell he was probing, doing his fatherly duty to sniff out any trouble. I sighed and sat down on the couch. His name's Daniel. He's different, Dad. He doesn't know about all this, I said, waving vaguely around to imply the wealth and the complicated strings attached. Dad sat down next to me, his expression serious now. Nora, you know you can't keep that a secret forever. If he's going to be part of your life, he should know who you are. I know, Dad. I want to be sure about him before I complicate things. Thanks for looking out for me, though. He ruffled my hair, like he used to when I was a kid. Always, kiddo. Just remember, if you need anything, I'm just a call away. And I've got eyes everywhere, he added with a wink. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to my new job and new life. Daniel was a constant presence, supportive and charming as ever. But there was an edge to him now, a sharpness that came with the responsibilities he carried. One night, over a quiet dinner at my place, Daniel brought up a topic I'd been dreading. Nora, when do you think I'll get to meet your parents? I feel like I'm missing a big part of your life. I paused, the weight of the moment settling over me. Well, my mom passed away a long time ago, and my dad's just a regular trucker. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now. Daniel frowned, a hint of concern crossing his face. I'm sorry to hear that, but whenever you're ready, I'd like to meet him. Family is important. I nodded, appreciating his sentiment, but knowing full well the reality of my father's world, a world I wasn't ready to introduce Daniel to just yet. Life with Daniel moved at a pace I never expected. We were already blending our lives together. My job at his company was going great, and our relationship was deepening. It all seemed like we were gearing up for something big, but I was still taken aback when that big moment actually happened. It was a normal evening. We were at his place, a cozy upscale apartment with views of the city skyline. We had just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. We were sitting on the couch, a documentary about ocean life playing in the background, the kind you watch but don't really watch. Daniel turned to me, his expression more serious than the situation called for. He took my hand, and suddenly, I felt my heart race as Daniel took a deep breath. Nora, he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through, and everything I want for our future. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Yeah? I love you, Nora. I love everything about you, and I can't imagine my life without you. He paused, swallowing hard, his nervousness palpable. That made two of us. I want to be with you always. Will you marry me? Just like that. No kneeling, no ring box, just straightforward and genuine, just like Daniel. I barely hesitated before replying, yes. The word rushed out almost as a relief. Yes, I will. His face lit up with that wide, infectious grin that had won me over from the start. He pulled me into a tight hug, and we spent the rest of the evening excitedly discussing our future, what we wanted and where we saw ourselves. It was thrilling and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge was telling my dad. I anticipated him being pleased, but his response was lukewarm at best. Nora, I want nothing but your happiness, he said, his voice heavy with concern. It was thrilling and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge was telling my dad. I anticipated him being pleased, but his response was lukewarm at best. Nora, I want nothing but your happiness, he said, his voice heavy with concern. But are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast. I'm sure, Dad. He's a great guy. You'll see, I tried to sound more confident than I felt. He sighed. All right, but promise me you'll sign a prenuptial agreement, just to be safe. The word prenuptial didn't scare me. It was just another part of the modern marriage package, especially with someone who had as much to lose as I did, even if Daniel didn't know the full extent of it. Of course, Dad. We'll handle it, I assured him. Good then, and Nora, I won't be at the wedding. I don't want to spoil your story about being a simple girl. Next came the introduction to Daniel's mother. Her reception was icy from the start. During dinner at their family home, she scrutinized me with a look that could freeze the room. Daniel, are you sure about this girl? She doesn't seem like a fit for our family, she remarked bluntly. Daniel tried to smooth things over, but his mother was relentless. A prenuptial agreement is non-negotiable, she insisted. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it would ease some of the tension. Absolutely, I wouldn't have it any other way. Later, we formalized the terms with a lawyer present. Despite these hurdles, our wedding in the Maldives was breathtaking. Standing beside Daniel with the ocean whispering behind us and the sand beneath our feet, I felt a surge of hope. It was just us, our love, and a future we were ready to shape together. Despite the rocky start with family expectations, married life began better than I could have hoped. Daniel and I settled into our new house, a beautiful place with more space than we'd ever need. It was supposed to be the start of our perfect life together. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove that I was more than just the boss's wife. My role at the company had always been challenging, but now there was an added layer of expectations. I was not only managing projects but also involved in key decision-making processes. Initially, Daniel seemed proud. He'd introduced me in meetings with a hint of pride in his voice. "This is Nora, my wife and our project lead." But as the months passed and the projects I led brought in significant profits, boosting the company's profile, something in Daniel began to shift. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a slight remark there. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought it up. "Nora, you're doing great at work. Maybe too great," he said, his voice strained. I looked up from my plate, puzzled. "What do you mean, too great? Isn't that good for the company?" "It is," he admitted, pushing his food around on his plate. "But the guys are starting to say it's turning into the Nora show over there." His words stung. "Isn't that a bit unfair? I thought you'd be happy that we're doing well." "I am happy," he said, though his tone was uncertain. "But it's a lot. You know, everyone's always talking about you, about how you handle things. It makes me wonder." The conversation marked the beginning of a series of challenges between Daniel and me. As the business grew, so did the strain in our relationship. Daniel's once supportive demeanor was now tinged with resentment. I couldn't comprehend why he was upset. Wasn't he the one who had encouraged me to take on more responsibility in the first place? Things took a turn for the worse when his mother came to stay with us for a few weeks. Her presence brought with it an old-world attitude that I had always managed to avoid. She made offhand remarks about my work, questioning how a wife could be so absent from home. "You're always at the office, Nora. When do you have time to take care of your husband?" she would say. I tried to shrug off her comments, aiming to keep the peace, but her words only deepened the growing rift between Daniel and me. It seemed that no amount of professional success could mend what was slowly unraveling at home. The more I achieved at work, the more our marriage suffered. One evening, Daniel came home with a grim expression. "Nora, I think it's best if you leave the company. We need to focus on our family, and your role there is causing too much tension." "Leave the company? But why? I've been contributing so much," I said, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "It's for the best. You can focus on the house, maybe start that garden you've always talked about," he replied dismissively, as if he were deciding on something trivial rather than my career. The next day, I discovered that he had let go of all our household staff. Housekeepers, cooks, gardeners. It was all on me now. "You wanted to be more involved at home. Here's your chance," he said coldly. I wasn't afraid of housework, but the way this was thrust upon me felt wrong. This wasn't the loving, caring man I had married. This was someone else, someone intolerant and controlling. His mother, who was still staying with us, seemed to relish the situation. "It's good for a wife to focus on her home," she would say, smirking slightly whenever Daniel talked about my new role as a full-time housewife. As I adjusted to this unexpected turn in my life, I felt a deep sense of shame. A shame that I hadn't seen this coming. A shame to admit that maybe my father was right about Daniel. When Daniel suggested a trip to Monte Carlo to rekindle what was left of our spark, I was hesitant but hopeful. That hope quickly faded when his mother announced she would join us. "It's been ages since I've traveled," she declared loudly, as if it were a decree that couldn't be opposed. Daniel welcomed her with open arms, never considering my feelings. We rented a small house in Monte Carlo, charming but costly, and it quickly became my prison rather than a retreat. From the start, Daniel and his mother treated the city as their playground. They rented luxurious cars, visited exclusive boutiques, and dined at the finest restaurants, while I was left to manage the household. They demanded home-cooked meals, reducing me to little more than a servant in our holiday home, cooking and cleaning while they enjoyed the city. As days passed, Daniel's mother's comments grew sharper. her tone more venomous. Really, Nora? Living at someone else's expense must be quite the life, she would sneer, her words a slap disguised in a smirk. Daniel never defended me. Instead, he laughed, his laughter a betrayal that echoed around the cold walls of our temporary home. I felt isolated, the city's sparkle muted by the shadow of their disdain. One evening, we passed a grand old-style hotel, its facade a reminder of a world of elegance and respect. Daniel's mother, her voice dripping with envy, remarked, "Lucky billionaire Harris. Imagine owning such a hotel, ruling over a palace like that." That night, at a restaurant overlooking the sea, the last vestige of my patience crumbled. As we sat down, she waved the waiter over with an imperious flick of her wrist. "For Nora, the cheapest dish will do. No need to spoil her with extravagances she doesn't deserve," she declared loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. Daniel's response was a casual chuckle, his agreement signaled not just by his words but also by a dismissive wave of his hand. "Good call, Mom. Let's not go overboard." Humiliation washed over me like the waves crashing on the rocks below. I rose from my chair, the clatter of the sea echoing my turmoil. Facing them both, my voice steadied but louder than I intended. I said, "I will not tolerate this any longer." My hands trembled, but my resolve was firm. "I'm divorcing you, Daniel." The cold air of Monte Carlo felt warm compared to the chill of betrayal as I walked away from the restaurant. Instead of apologizing, Daniel and his mother followed me with insults. As I quickened my pace, my mother-in-law's voice rang out sharply, "Just look at her, a beggar, unworthy of my son." My heart raced, but before I could get far, Daniel caught up with me and yanked my purse from my shoulder, his fingers clenching it tightly. "This is my money, Nora. Go on, get out on all fours if you have to," he said with contempt, yanking the purse away and leaving me stunned on the sidewalk. Beside him, his mother laughed cruelly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Maybe now you'll learn to beg in Monte Carlo since that's all you're good for." Their laughter echoed down the street, leaving me feeling powerless and alone. But as they hurled their final insults, fate intervened. We were near the grand old-style hotel Daniel's mother had earlier envied. Pointing to the hotel, she sneered, "Maybe they'll let you in as a beggar." At that moment, the hotel's gates opened and a guard appeared, his face lighting up with recognition. "Miss Harris," he called out warmly, walking over with a respectful salute. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Daniel and his mother's expressions changed from satisfaction to confusion. The guard smiled broadly. "Your father told us you might come by. Please, this way. The best room is always reserved for you." Daniel's mother paled, her earlier bravado crumbling. "Harris?" "As in the billionaire Harris," she stammered, her voice faltering. Ignoring them both, I walked towards the guard, my posture straightening. "Thank you, Pierre," I said, my voice calm and collected. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Behind me, Daniel's pleas began in a desperate tone. "Nora, please, I didn't mean it." His mother, not to be outdone, shouted past her son, "Perhaps we could come in for a drink at least." I didn't look back. Entering the hotel, the doors closing behind me felt symbolic, shutting out the chaos of my old life. Pierre escorted me to the reception where the staff greeted me with the respect due to the daughter of their employer. The flight back to the United States was long, giving me ample time to contemplate my next steps. By the time I landed, my resolve had solidified like the city sidewalks, unyielding and steadfast. The following day, I found myself in the office of a reputable lawyer, papers spread out like a battle map. "During your tenure at the company, it appears your husband failed to pay you bonuses owed for the multi-million-dollar deals you closed," the lawyer pointed out, his tone a mix of surprise and indignation. "That sounds about right," I sighed, reflecting on the countless hours I devoted to the company and the success I had driven. "We're suing for $30 million. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the heated glares Daniel shot across the room as he fumbled through his defense. The man I once loved looked pitiful. When the verdict came, awarding me $3 million, Daniel's face crumpled. Outside the courthouse, he made one last plea. "Nora, everyone's laughing at me. I messed up. Can we start over?" His words might have tugged at my heartstrings once, but that time had passed. "You only missed the money, Daniel. Maybe listen less to your mother next time," I said, my voice sharp against the crisp air. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels on the pavement marking the end of that chapter. Returning home, I faced my father, The air between us was thick with unspoken words until I broke the silence. Dad, I should have listened to you. He wrapped me in a warm, forgiving hug. You had to learn on your own. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. We talked late into the night about life, mistakes, and new beginnings. His advice was a beacon as I navigated my thoughts about the future. Inspired by our conversation, I began laying the groundwork for my next venture. My experience at Daniel's company had not only honed my skills but ignited a passion for the industry I couldn't deny. I decided to open my own investment firm. With my expertise and the substantial settlement, I had the resources to start something meaningful, something mine. Weeks turned into months as I built my business from the ground up. The challenges were daunting, but every setback taught me a lesson, and every success confirmed that I was on the right path. Sitting in my new office, overlooking the bustling streets below, I realized how far I had come, from a disillusioned wife in a loveless marriage to a competent business owner. The journey had been fraught with hurdles, but each one had made me stronger.